The US after 2028, the truth that nobody's ready for. Whatever happens over the next 2 years, the job of the next administration will be to convince the world that Trump was an anomaly and not a trend. I suspect this work will take the entirety of the first 4 years, and I highly doubt it will succeed, at least not completely. I highly doubt allies will just reverse the course they've now set out on. Whether they succeed or not, a lot of the Trump administration's decisions will bear fruit after 2028. The impact of isolating the US and alienating allies will be felt then, which could precipitate a financial crisis, and that administration will be to blame. Also, expect China's star to continue to rise as their current deals bear fruit. By the way, I expect this to be true whether a Republican or Democrat is in power. Once Trump's gone and no more bankable to the GOP, I expect everyone will rush to say they didn't agree with what he did and they were the ones silently resisting him all these years. Massive debt, drastically reduced tourism dollars, and even more civil strife. And a lot more people without health insurance. The next president will be blamed for not fixing it, and voters will put the party back in power that caused it. Repeat until we're just broke. If by some miracle the Trump admin is finally wedged out of power, they sure as heck aren't going to facilitate a smooth transition, or really any transition, knowing how petty and cruel these motherfrickers are. The incoming administration will have no momentum to start the term with. It's like a baton race, but your teammate suddenly stops and chucks the baton in the opposite direction. I don't think most Americans understand yet how much Trump has broken that simply can't be fixed. Ideally, Democrats will choose a candidate who can explain exactly the answer to this question and hammer on it until the election and win it. Well, I think most likely the Democrats are going to find the most unlikable, uncharismatic candidate they can possibly find. They'll run this candidate against whoever succeeds Trump, or even Trump himself running a third term while everyone just casually ignores any laws that forbid this, and the GOP candidate will win. While your comment about Democratic candidates rings true, I do think that barring the current administration pulling a bunch of election interference crap, which I admit isn't unlikely, the pendulum will swing back to Democrat in the next election. But yes, as many others have pointed out, the winner will have so much damage to fix in ways that won't have immediately positive outcomes in people's lives that they will not be popular for it. And they probably won't be able to win in 2032 because people won't be able to see through the short-term pain for the long-term gain of anything that they do to fix Trump's economy. Remember that Germany once became fascist and is now a very stable democracy. It's possible to come back. It won't be easy. Things will probably need to become even more messy before people that supported this or were apathetic to it will admit that there's a problem. And I really hope that the big mess isn't something like a world war and partition. But the way things are going, that looks like a distinct possibility. Today, Germany is a respected and trusted ally. The USA will be that again, too. Maybe not in my lifetime, I'll admit, I'm in my early 30s, but it objectively will reach that again. If the Democrats win, they'll spend the next 4 years attempting to clean up the mess. Then maybe during that 4 years, people will get amnesia about how bad things were under Trump and consider voting for a Republican again. Sadly, this is almost certain to happen again. Don't forget that the US is in this mess because the voters somehow thought 4 more years of that frickin' guy was good, despite living through the absolute crap show of his first term just 4 years prior. I mean, we're going to find out. Let's get to the midterms first. Let's just get to the next week first. I'm so tired, boss. Honestly, they should all just wipe their political and judicial systems clean and start fresh. Several parties, ranked choices, term limit, age limit, zero tolerance for any misconduct, first strike out. Massive overhaul of the media and news also. The next administration will have to deal with the rest of the world, including previously solid allies hedging against the US and drawing closer to our adversaries. A lot of the sanctions, regimes, and soft power the US has exerted in the past won't work if previously solid allies are wondering if bolstering our power is really in their own national interest. It's pretty remarkable that the Chinese, the country of the Cultural Revolution, Tiananmen Square, repression in Tibet, the horrors of Xinjiang, and suppression of protests in Hong Kong, and backer of Russia's war in the Ukraine, can now present itself as a serious, alternative, dependable upholder of a rules-based international order. But that's the opportunity the current US administration has given them. Look, lots of countries have trashed their futures and survived. Germany and Japan have done pretty admirable jobs of recovery from fascism, I think. The future depends on how well we can account for what we've done and destroyed in this era, and our ability to collectively take stock of how badly we've messed up a good thing will determine how quickly we can recover our research programs and our ability to innovate global industry. I mean, Germany and Japan took a resounding defeat with millions of citizens killed, and 40+ years before your admirable job of recovery was achieved, and that took major investment from the USA, EU countries, and in the case of Germany, the USSR as well, due to the Cold War pushing these countries to invest and show how good it is to live on their side. In the case of the USA today, none of that's going to happen. Burn it to the ground and rewrite everything with guardrails in place so that one person is one vote, so this can never happen again. New laws forbidding felons from running for President of the United States or Vice President. I mean, hopefully, a long, thorough effort at de-magification. See, I want to believe this will happen, but I have zero faith in Americans anymore. Especially seeing that one video of a guy saying there's absolutely nothing Trump could do for him to not support him. Depends on which party is in charge. If it's the Republican Party, they'll continue with the current administration's agenda. If it's the Democratic Party, and that's a big if, they'll have a big mess to clean up, but only for a short time, because in all likelihood in 2032, Republicans will likely gain control and undo what little changes Democrats have done, and the cycle will keep repeating over and over. Oh, it's cute that you think that the regime will let go in 2028 with a simple vote for the next president. I mean, sure, I hope for that reality, but at this point I'm not holding my breath. Trump literally just said that Republicans should be taking control of elections and nationalizing them, and this is just incoming on the midterm election, which could flip House and Senate seats not in his favor. The fact that Democrats didn't do anything to put additional guardrails up while Biden was president should tell you a lot. The next government will say the previous one was bad, but will continue doing much of the same crap. It will be very hard to trust the USA and accept it as a reliable ally in the future. Donnie has done irreparable damage. The economy and trade can recover, but regaining respect and trust is another matter altogether. I think a lot of people are going to prison. I certainly hope so, but the next Dem president might also try to unite the nation or some bullcrap. Well, Lisa Simpson is prepared to deal with a massive budget crisis created by former President Trump by reminding China they used to be cool. Then she's gonna legalize it, per her brother, the Secretary of Keeping It Real. I don't know, but as a Canadian, I now believe that we should build a nuclear deterrent. If they're smart, they'll go whole hog on prosecution and setting up laws and punishments to make sure it doesn't go like this again. They will not be smart. Well, at this rate, there won't be any government left. The US will break into different countries, not by civil war, but by just refusing to work with the federal government, and the federal government will be too broke or disorganized to stop it. Well, hello from the Republic of New England. I mean, you guys joke, but we're already seeing this in action as California separately joins the World Health Organization, and a bunch of states on the West Coast and East Coasts are forming separate health alliances because they don't trust the Department of Health and Human Services. Wait, so the movie Civil War is a legitimate potential outcome in some people's eyes? Well, that's grim. Frankly, I haven't been able to call anything that's happened in US politics for a decade now, so I feel like my ability to agree with any one claim with any certainty is shaky at best, but I just don't see this one. I honestly don't envy whoever it is, because they're going to be walking into the worst economy since the Great Depression with a government stacked with alt-right nutbags in every agency. We're essentially going to have to purge most agencies of the MAGA rot and then abolish the two that have lost all public confidence, ICE and the DHS. Homeland Security has mostly been about revoking rights from citizens and spitting on the Fourth Amendment. Some other thoughts: we really need to end the war on substances, repeal the Patriot and FISA Acts, drastically reducing police presence and authority in this country back to what it should be, using all DHS and ICE funding along with cuts to the military and police agency budgets to finally give this country the universal healthcare we deserve, and fix our broken infrastructure across the nation. That last one by funding and creating the projects that will do so, not just handing a bunch of money to companies that either do a crap job or never do anything at all and keep the money. And honestly, that's just a fraction of the corruption and mess we need to clean up in our government. We need a new Voting Rights Act. We need to get presidential pardons under control and drastically reduce executive overreach. We need to fix our mess of a judiciary, starting with the Supreme Court. We need to declare the Heritage Foundation, Federalist Society, and IPAC as terror organizations with the goal of co-opting the government for their own favor, basically treason, and kick IPAC out and jail the leaders of the other two while dismantling their organizations. Oh, and there's the problem of industry being out of control, so I don't even know where to begin with the new robber baron era other than just maybe seizing the richest people's assets and their companies and forcing a breakup. And my god, the media. Where do we even frickin' begin with that? This country is messed up 10 ways from Sunday, and the work we need to do to fix it cannot be done in 1 term, 2 terms, or possibly even 10 terms. And that's knowing that opposition will still be fighting the whole time, trying to lie, cheat, and steal their way back to the top, with a populace who couldn't even remember 4 years later why this frickin' guy should never have power again until it was too late. So yeah, I sure don't envy who has to take power after MAGA falls, which thankfully is an inevitability at this point. It's going to be a long, rough road, and we need hope the people don't mess it up along the way by putting more corrupt idiots in charge out of being impatient that everything they voted to screw up isn't fixed in 2 days. Collapse. Trump is not leaving a possibility of a future for the United States without himself in charge. His trade war will implode because nobody's going to keep shooting themselves in the foot day in, day out for no reason, but by the time we apologize and try to rebuild our trade relationships, everyone else will have moved on. The American hegemony of trade is finished. He's abandoned our diplomatic mission worldwide and will never recover from the shame of the things he's done, nor will we ever regain the trust of the people, governments, and organizations he's spurned. The American empire of goodwill is done. The damage his administration is doing to the government itself will take decades to repair. From the Justice Department to the Bureau of Land Management, every single office is being run into the ground by yes-men and sycophants who are more than happy to let him make all of the decisions no matter how incompetent they may be. The American government is done. Who's going to keep holding Venezuela hostage once he's out of the picture? You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Spend 4 years trying to reverse it, 50% success rate, next Republican swing starts from second base instead of home plate, and the slide into oblivion takes half the time. If the nominee isn't in his late 70s, we're done for. I admire your optimism that there'll be a real election in 2028. Seriously, Trump straight up told his base that 2024 would be the last time they'd ever need to vote. He's mused and joked about rigging, tampering with, or outright suspending elections. Vote suppression likely won Trump the presidency in 2024, and they pulled it off under a Democratic president. Now MAGA is not merely in power, but they've stacked the government, including long-term, ostensibly non-partisan positions, along with high-ranking members of the military and 3-letter agencies with Heritage Foundation loyalists. There's a chance Elon might have rigged some voting machines too, and this certainly wouldn't be off the table in 2028. And beyond all of that, they now have a militarized secret police force who are already financially incentivized to ensure a Republican win. That $50K signing bonus for all the new ICE hires gets clawed back if they don't work there for 5 years. And if a Democrat gets in 2028, most of them will at the very least get laid off before the bonus is locked in. At this point, as an outsider, it's so frickin' obvious to me that y'all aren't going to have a legitimate election that I almost wonder if all of the ostensibly progressive people saying MAGA will be out in the next election are just right-wing trolls working to discourage people from taking more meaningful action than waving signs and blowing whistles. Based on the last 2 decades of American history, Democrats will win the next election and spend 8 years trying to clean up Republicans' messes. Republicans will slow that progress right down, whilst also telling voters that Republicans would have fixed these problems faster. After 8 years of cleanup, and the country looking better than it was before, idiots will elect another Republican president who will push self-interest policies and run the country into the ground over the next 8 years. And so the cycle continues. Huh, optimistic of you to think that it'll be 2 consecutive terms for the Democrats. Well, the least you can say about this last opinion is that at least some people are of the opinion that this pendulum swinging has been going on well before the current guy, and some would argue way further back than 2 decades like this commenter claims. Oh, the next government. You're funny. Republicans aren't going to go without a fight. Weak little men that are addicted to power. Weak little men who think bullying and cruelty are toughness. They're getting bolder with each unanswered crime or atrocity. The Democrats will get elected, refuse to prosecute anyone, and then lose again in 2030? The same thing Democrats do after every Republican term, Pinky. fix things and finally start to get things right until they lose another election and things are screwed for another 5 or 6 years. America seems to have overlooked a pretty big detail. They always trusted that whoever became president would have a soul, and not be a sociopathic grifter who only cares about making himself rich, and allowing his white supremacist buddies to run the show while he's off, counting his money and staying out of prison. We may need to rethink the Constitution. The years of good human beings who actually care about the country being the president are over. Now the job is open to any psychopath who can get a bunch of idiots to vote for them. If we still have a government in 2028, they'd sure as F better prosecute these motherfrickers. If they don't, then democracy is surely deader than it already is. When, in the history of America, has this ever actually meaningfully happened? Not the Civil War, not Nixon, not George W. Bush's admin. Crap, even the Germans in World War II ultimately just got a slap on the wrist where only the top-tier ones got tried and punished. Heck, if they were good at a thing, then they got the Operation Paperclipped right on over here. We've never been a country of deserved consequences, and it's all been really coming to a head in the last decade. All it took was the one guy throwing the gentleman's agreement right out the window. There's no going back from this. It's now shown that you can toss decorum out the windows with impunity and without shame. As the kids say, we're cooked, fam. I don't know, but I'll guarantee you 3 things for November 2028. Republicans will still vote red, red, red. A third of eligible adult Americans will sit on their fat butts and find excuses not to vote. And popular social media will have no criticism for the lazy ones who don't vote. Almost like a great number of complainers on social media are also big talkers but also non-voters. America is already toast. The Trump regime has done damage that will take generations to undo. Yeah, I'm so angry and sad, this won't be resolved in my lifetime. The rest of my life is going to be worse because of these guys. Well, there's one sad truth that the Trump era exposed, and that's that there's a segment of Americans who get moist when watching humans suffering, and I'm afraid that that is there to stay. We as a country clean up the Republican mess just like every other time they've been in the White House. I really hope this is all an eye-opener for everyone. We need to depower the corporations and the rich. Anyone who runs on that has my vote. Well, we keep moving forward. The next president always spends 4 years undoing what the previous president did. It's a vicious cycle and nothing gets done with a bunch of bureaucrats pushing their own political donors' agenda. Ask J.D. Vance. He'll be in charge. Damage control on every front. As an American, who cares? Half the country would kill 1/4 of the country if it gave them total control over the rest. Judicial branch has caved or been supplanted. Legislative branch is anemic or powerless to stop or just unwilling. The executive is totally corrupted and subservient to foreign powers. Just let it all burn. I mean, you're all talking like Trump is the problem. The real problem, that the rest of the world already knows by the way, is the voters that put him there. That half of America doesn't disappear in 2028. Either do it again or nearly crap themselves at the mess they have to clean up. Negative population growth, in addition to everything else that people are posting about, will dramatically reduce entitlement support for the people who can't live without it. This in turn will precipitate all manner of crises: economic, financial, public health, and social. Americans now have a fascist government, Gestapo in the street, and they think that they'll have a next election? Nah, you're gonna get a fabricated war and then a state of urgency and no election for security reasons. The president proposed ending elections again last week. It's amazing how much changes in a very short time with this administration. I'm recording this video in early February 2026, and frankly, I have no idea how many more jokes or concrete steps the country will take towards blocking voters at the midterms this year. Let's see how well these comments age. People need to be held accountable, and we're not even remotely going to start because of the tradition of, well, we can't prosecute them, we've got to come together as a nation and heal. And this pathetic response we will get can't, not on any level, happen. From Supreme Court, Trump, Republican Party members, sitting politicians, down to the lowest peons, they've all got to be punished to the maximum utterly for their crimes, and permanently barred from even the same plane of existence to any form of power. It's not even baseline removal, and the party as the party has been against the country and only party matters for decades. Sure, they'll just become MAGA 2.0, but punishment must happen. Anything less, and America will never and can never even begin to repair the damage done to its standing. America as a world power is over. Beyond the highest military bill on the planet, And by the way, the punished should include the billionaires, the millionaires, party members, and leadership in the Dems who also helped things through. And I have no remote, even dream of this happening. History alone says it won't. Not in America. Thus, the tradition. We can't prosecute them. We've got to come together and heal. Whatever will happen, the US is lost as a partner to others, and this will not reverse. Most likely, as others have stated, it'll take all 4 years just to try to fix the damage, and then it will just start all over again. Unless Trump and everyone in his administration goes to prison, including Elon and his goons, we're doomed. The crazy news stories from 2001 that vanished overnight because of September 11th. The FBI caught a pharmacist who had spent decades diluting chemo meds for cancer patients. Truly a twisted and vile thing to do. It was on the cusp of breaking national headlines when the agent in charge was set to meet with the director of the FBI. On the morning of September, well, yeah, you've guessed it. There's a podcast that tells the story. It's called American Greed. This guy was Robert Courtney, and he underdosed thousands of doses. The nurses were the ones who noticed the patients getting chemo bags from this one specialty pharmacy just didn't get the crazy side effects, and they were getting zero benefits either. Good nurses who actually pay attention to their intuition. You know, the ones routinely crushed in real life by everyone, even though nurse intuition has been clinically proven to be a thing. They save so many lives. They caught the Green River Killer, the most prolific serial killer in the USA, a few weeks after. If Sep 11th hadn't happened, I believe this would have been the major news event of the year. He killed for decades. The family of a victim in my hometown was set to go on, I think it was 2020? It was some nationally syndicated program. They were going to get a chance to get attention on their daughter's case. It was set the same week as the terror attack. They never did go on TV about it at all. It was discovered that the McDonald's Monopoly game had been rigged by an insider for years, and all the largest prizes were funneled to his personal friends, as well as the Gambino crime family. The trial for this fraud started on September 10th, 2001, so pretty much all news coverage was overshadowed the next day. The worst part was that there were next to zero consequences for everyone involved, including the mastermind who basically stole $20 million with a slap on the wrist. He also single-handedly destroyed an advertising company employing hundreds of people, and although he's technically on the hook for restitution, he's only required to pay a pittance back every year while living in his comfortable home, free to do whatever he wants. On Sunday the 9th of September 2001, 60 Minutes aired an interview with Anne Heche, in which she proclaimed her ability to communicate telepathically with faraway space aliens, or maybe interdimensional beings, I don't remember the details. It was the main focus of every late-night show's monologue on Monday. Never mentioned again by Tuesday for obvious reasons. We're going to come across a lot of comments either claiming that the entire world was on a slow news day due to stories like this, or that a lot of really important stuff was going under the radar, like a couple of the earlier comments. Like it or hate it, I kind of find myself longing for the days where absolutely silly stuff like this was the norm on the news. It's just overwhelming these days. The killing of Henryk Siwiak, a person who was murdered in New York City on September 11th. Not properly investigated because law enforcement was diverted to the terror attacks. The only reported homicide on that day as well. The massacre of the royal family of Nepal, and then Nepal abolished monarchy in 2006. Just a few weeks after the attacks on September 11th, a passenger aircraft crashed in suburban Queens, New York, killing 260 people on board. This event coincided with the aftermath, so naturally people assumed it was a second wave of attacks. What's interesting about this is that after that plane or helicopter crash earlier this year in DC, it was labeled the worst US commercial airline crash since 2001. So many people who I've talked to think it's referring to September 11th, but it's actually referring to the crash that you've just mentioned. The day before that fateful day, George Carlin taped a comedy special titled, "I Kinda Like It When a Lot of People Die." It never saw the light of day. Michael Jackson gave 2 shows in New York together with his brothers. That was on September 7th and on September 10th. That's why I was in New York on the day of the attack. And on the 15th, I had to board a plane to get back home to Germany. I went to the show on the 7th. I feel like that was the end of the 90s. Everything changed after. Thankfully, they recorded the concerts. Most of us paid no attention to the summer of sharks. The 24-hour news channels were so bored before September 11th that they went into live team coverage anytime a shark was spotted remotely near the coast. My wife died a couple of weeks earlier. Not really big news to most people, but that was some crazy crap for me. And her, I guess. I can't imagine going through something that huge while everyone else is just focused on something else. I'm so sorry. Semi-similarly, my mum's husband died just as COVID was ramping up. After a couple of years of trying to hold a memorial service, she decided too much time had passed for anyone to want to show up. In November, a passenger aircraft with 260 people aboard crashed into a neighborhood in Queens and killed numerous people on the ground. It was the second deadliest accidental plane crash in US history and caused evacuations from office towers in Manhattan. But when it transpired that it was not a terror attack, it fell out of the news and was largely forgotten. The release of the Segway. I'm mostly kidding, but I remember how it was hyped as a mysterious invention that would revolutionize transportation forever. And college friends of mine actually got up early for the news conference about what it was. A perpetual motion machine? Flying cars? Only to find out that it was, in fact, a scooter. Nobody outside of my locality knew about it, but the day after the event, my elementary school had an explosive threat so severe that they walked us to a church half a mile away and asked our parents to come get us. On the very same morning, the Concorde made its first flight with passengers since being grounded the year before. Commercial flights would resume a couple of months later, but it was doomed. There was a slump in air travel and supposedly a significant number of Concorde customers died in the World Trade Center. The Concorde was a good idea that was doomed to fail from the start. If it hadn't been for September 11th, it would have been something else. Having a plane that goes faster than commercial jets is a great idea. That idea becomes less great when the maintenance is more costly than flying and you can't fly the damn thing anywhere because it's so loud. The 2001 crisis in Argentina was an economic, social, and political catastrophe caused by unsustainable external debt, a collapsed convertibility model, and years of corruption and adjustment. It ended with the country in default, the famous Corralito that blocked savings, and looting, repression, and 5 presidents in less than 2 weeks. I was 4 years old and it was my mother's birthday. People were crying because their homes and workplaces were being looted. People were standing guard on roofs of houses with weapons. In the UK, a government communications advisor got into a lot of trouble specifically for sending an email on September 11th suggesting that it was a good day to bury bad news, if there was anything that needed to be announced but the government didn't really want people to pay attention to. I mean, she was right, but unfortunately it got leaked and it did look pretty insensitive. The Chandra Levy disappearance and ensuing media circus around Gary Condit. Locally, there was a pretty decent-sized earthquake on the evening of September 11th under Beverly Hills. There was an enormous industrial accident in France that was thought to be a terror attack at the time. They put down what's-his-frickin'-face for the Oklahoma City bombings? Oh, Timothy McVeigh, the original OK Boomer. ALIA died in a plane crash just a couple of weeks prior. She was only 22. Also infuriating given it was a completely preventable death. They overloaded a tiny little twin-engine plane with too much audio equipment. Plus, wasn't one of her bodyguards, a really massive guy like 300 pounds upwards, also on the plane? The coughing major was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire UK and won the game 2 days before September 11th. Paula Poundstone was arrested for alleged lewd acts and some pretty awful stuff we can't say in this video, which was overlooked because of September 11th. In Texas, a few days after September 11th, a barge hit the Queen Isabella Bridge on South Padre Island and knocked down a section of the bridge. 8 people died. The news was mostly confined to local area news. Any other week, this would have been front-page news. In those first few days, all networks were covering September 11th 24/7. As I recall on our news, it was 20 seconds. Oh, and by the way, a barge hit a bridge in Texas and 8 people have died. 6 million cows and sheep were slaughtered and burned in the UK due to the foot-and-mouth epidemic. The Forrest Gump sequel is about to be greenlit, but then September 11th happened and they never revived the project because it seemed too messed up to do so. Dude, have you heard them talking about the script and what would have happened in the story? It's better that that thing was left unmade. If I recall correctly, the author of the original book hated the movie and purposefully made the sequel as weird as possible as a way to get back at it, and got the studio to pay upfront for the movie rights on an unfilmable mess. Because he didn't just hate the movie, he was also screwed over by the studio the first time around. Honestly, the narrator has just done a quick Google and amen to not ruining a classic movie with that sequel. Jenny comes back as a ghost, Forrest catches the leader of Iraq at the time, and watches and hates the first Forrest Gump movie. Also dances with Princess Diana. I'm pretty sure the British public would have been stirred to war by that last part. Metal Gear Solid predicted social media and its effects on politics and society at large. A quote from the game: "Everyone withdraws into their own small gated community, afraid of a larger forum. They stay inside their little ponds, leaking whatever truth suits them into the growing cesspool of society at large. The different cardinal truths neither clash nor mesh. No one's invalidated, but nobody's right. Not even natural selection can take place here. The world is being engulfed in truth. And this is the way the world ends. Not with a bang, but with a whimper." Pretty accurately reflects the mess we're in today, and this is before Facebook or even MySpace existed. My childhood friend's birthday is on that fateful day, so that had to suck for him going forward. My ex has her birthday on that date, but she was born before. At least her childhood was unaffected. Today, people don't make anything out of it. For the few years after, it was probably weird. The anthrax attacks of the same year. God, I still remember the panic after that. For some reason, parents everywhere in America were absolutely convinced anthrax was just going to show up in our Halloween candy after all that. I got a weird rash on my legs a few days after receiving a check from a client in New York City. When I went to the doctor, she didn't even blink and automatically put me on Cipro. The Enron collapse is well known, but its effects were unrealized back then. They cooked the books by putting a lot of their negative accounts in international banks, not so easily seen by financial review boards like Arthur Andersen. They claim everything's fine. Employees who are also stockholders knew inside that it was not. The selling of stocks, collapse of a major corporation, through the actions of stockholders who knew better what was going on, it's all still seen today. And corporations now bow down more to stockholders than customers or their own employees as a result. Not long before that date, the drunk-driving NYPD cop that killed a whole bunch of people. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? In Seattle, a woman climbed up on the railing of a ship canal bridge contemplating self-deletion. Onlookers who were ticked off by the resulting traffic jam told her to jump, which she did. She somehow survived the impact, and in the days following, the city was forced to take a look in the mirror. A few "What has our city become?" articles were published, but then September 11th happened. To this day, I do not know what became of the jumper. Air Transat Flight 236 happened just a few weeks before September 11th and is one of the most incredible aviation incidents ever. It was an Airbus A330 flying from Toronto to Lisbon that ran out of fuel over the Atlantic Ocean due to a massive fuel leak caused by improper maintenance. The pilots managed to glide the plane for over 75 miles, about 20 minutes, with no engines and safely landed at a military base in the Azores. All 306 people on board survived. It was the longest successful glide of a commercial jetliner in history. On September 11th, during the news broadcasts, I remember a news ticker at the bottom specifically calling out that the band Anthrax was changing their name to Basketful of Puppies. It was actually a press release they put out, and in the paranoia there was limited thought, and someone saw the name Anthrax during a time of heightened terror attacks and put it right on the news sticker. I got my braces off on September 11th and nobody gave a crap. Real big day for me, I was just so excited. Dale Earnhardt died. This one's easy to overlook because it caused a lot of reviews to NASCAR safety standards and kind of transformed the sport, because at first glance it wasn't even that bad of a crash. George Harrison's death occurred 29th of November of the same year. It should have been huge news, but it ended as a footnote. In Canada, we had a few news stories. 2 weeks before the event, there was the tragic murder of a minor in London, Ontario. At home, that was the big news story just before September 11th. Unfortunately, locally, she didn't get forgotten. There was also the Walkerton tainted water inquiry, which was taking place at the time on the same date. This inquiry implicated Ontario Premier Mike Harris, who announced his resignation in early October 2001. A number of Canadian Alliance MPs called on leader Stockwell Day to resign. They broke from the party and formed their own caucus. This, along with the Walkerton inquiry, were probably the biggest news stories in Canada in the weeks leading up to September 11th. The death of Ernie Coombs, aka Mr. Dress-Up, just days before the event. Whilst mostly unknown outside of Canada, he's known for being a mentor to Mr. Rogers. They'd worked together on a children's show on the CBC before Mr. Rogers moved back to the US to start his own children's television program. I was working in a Staples at the time and used an AS400 system, Unix-based. Somehow I managed to change the entire store network address to Store Groovy rather than just my password. Needless to say, absolute chaos. Tills, VPN, phones, everything went down. No idea how I did it, but I royally effed everything up. The sales manager told me to sort it out before leaving for the day. He and I did not get on. I said, "You're the manager, manage." They tried to sack me but failed. That's my 2001 mayhem story. Slayer released God Hates Us All. On the same day, Dream Theater released a live album which oddly enough depicted the New York City skyline in flames, including the towers. Thoy Trang, who played the Yellow Power Ranger in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, passed away a week before the event. It was a car accident and she wasn't wearing her seatbelt, if I'm not mistaken. Some guy successfully got away with murder on the day because the police were too busy at Ground Zero to investigate the killing. The assault on Rainbow Farm happened the same day. A lot of people in this area are still teed off about it. A book was written about it titled Burning Rainbow Farm. Reports are that a movie's being made. Yeah, we're still mad. There's been a lot of interesting discoveries I've made looking up what happened in the background of this earth-shaking event, but we're starting to come up on our repeat answers now, so here's an interesting review of some things that slipped through the net in a very different sense. We missed all the warnings that it was coming. In fact, all the warnings that it was coming from as early as the Clinton years. In December 1998, the CIA's Counter-Terror Center reported to President Bill Clinton that AQ was preparing for attacks in the US that might include hijacking aircraft. In April 2001, Ahmad Shah Massoud, leader of the Northern Alliance, asked for humanitarian aid for the people of Afghanistan. Massoud told the European Parliament that his intelligence agents had gained limited knowledge about a large-scale terror attack on US soil being imminent. Massoud was then eliminated by AQ 2 days before the attacks. On the same day, Vladimir Putin called Bush and expressed his concerns over Massoud's assassination, warning him that something larger might be afoot. On May 1, 2001, the CIA informed the White House that a group presently in the United States was in the process of planning a terror attack. On June 13, 2001, the leader of the terror organization made a tape for supporters mentioning a possible attack on the G8 summit in Genoa, Italy. The plan was said to involve a plane packed with explosives being crashed into the summit to kill President Bush and other world leaders in attendance. The president's daily brief on June 29, 2001, stated that the United States is not the target of a disinformation campaign by AQ. The document repeated evidence surrounding the threat, including an interview that month with a Middle Eastern journalist in which the leader of AQ's aides warned of a coming attack, as well as competitive pressures that the terror leader was feeling, given the number of Islamists being recruited for the separatist Russian region of Chechnya. The CIA reiterated that the attacks were anticipated to be near-term and to have dramatic consequences. In July 2001, J. Cofer Black, the CIA's counter-terror chief, and George Tenet, the CIA's director, met with Condoleezza Rice to inform her about communications intercepts and other top-secret intelligence showing the increasing likelihood that AQ would soon attack the United States. Rice listened but was unconvinced, having other priorities on which to focus. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld questioned the information, suggesting it was deception meant to gauge the US response. On the same day, FBI Special Agent Kenneth Williams sent a letter to FBI headquarters warning of suspects connected to AQ who were attending flight schools in Arizona and demanding further investigation. This document is known as the Phoenix Memo. On August 6, 2001, the president's daily briefing, titled AQ Determined to Strike in US, warned that the leader was planning to exploit his operatives' access to the US to mount a strike. Rice responded to the claims about the briefing in a statement before the September 11th Commission, stating the brief was not prompted by any specific threat information and did not raise the possibility that the enemy might use airplanes as missiles. On 23rd of August 2001, the Mossad gave the CIA a list of 19 suspects living in the US who were believed to be mounting an imminent attack against the United States. Only 4 of the names are known, but all belonged to the eventual hijackers in the attacks. The head of the Algerian State Intelligence Service, DIS, General Mohammed Median, went to the US a few days before September 11th. He spoke of an imminent attack against the United States based on secret memos sent on September 6th by Smain Lamari, the number 2 in the DRS at the time. Shortly after the attacks, only 2 civilian planes were authorized to take off, the one carrying members of the Saudi royal family and people close to the leader of AQ, and the one bringing General Mohammed Median to Algiers. Honestly, the only crazy thing about the event is that it was allowed to happen at all. People talk about it being an inside job, but the reality is that Bush and co were just utterly frickin' useless at their jobs. The Chandra Levy-Gary Condit saga. This was on the news every night for many weeks prior to the day itself. Condit was dragged as a murderer and accused of covering it up. It was front page on all the papers and mags. After the 11th, it disappeared until they found her remains. There was also the disappearance of Sneha and Philip, who went missing technically the night before or morning of September 11th, although it's been believed that she may have died trying to help people at the towers. Her case wasn't as overshadowed though because her husband made an effort to bring the case to shows like Unsolved Mysteries at the time to try and find out the truth. The Patriot Act, one of the largest ever transfers of power from the people to the US government, and presidents on both sides of the aisle have been gleefully renewing it ever since. A politician in Cali was under suspicion for having to do with the disappearance of a much younger intern of his with whom he was having an affair. Rudy Giuliani was about to step down as mayor of New York because of all the corruption that he had been linked to. Then, by the end of the month, he was America's mayor. I got double-teamed in the restroom of a Blockbuster in Flint, Michigan. The Diamondbacks took down the Yankees in the World Series. You know why I hated those Terrifighters? They forced me not to cheer against the Yankees in the World Series. What a jerk move to do that to me. Ernie Coombs, Mr. Dress-Up for Canadians in the know, had a stroke and died a week after September 11th. 20,000 people died in an earthquake in India. The movie Spotlight tells the story of the investigative journalists from the Boston Globe newspaper who broke the story of the widespread scandal in the Catholic Church in the Boston area. This was one of the stories that really started the absolute avalanche of child mistreatment cases in the American Catholic Church in the 21st century. One of the big turning points in the movie is when they're about to break the story. Then September 11th happens. It's obviously a big national story, and one of the flights was from Logan Airport, so there's a Boston element to it. So this huge story that they had been investigating for months and months got put on hold. The herpetologist Joseph Slowinski died from a venomous snake bite in Myanmar that day. The US Embassy couldn't arrange transportation to the hospital because, well, they were busy with some other things. Slowinski apparently had a reputation for two things, by the way: his expertise with venomous snakes and his carelessness with them in the field. What great things can't we have anymore because of, well, idiots? Years ago, Long John Silver's would donate their excess food to a local shelter. Then, one idiot tried to get rich by suing the chain, saying that the donated food was tampered with, even alleging it was deliberately poisoned to kill the homeless population. The case went nowhere, but it made all of the local restaurants hesitant to donate, and now none of them donate any food at all. This hit all of the convention centers and large event spaces. We have to throw away so much food now, even if it's individually packaged. My high school used to do a big breakfast buffet for graduating seniors on the last day of school. Bacon, eggs, pancakes, sausage, fruits, pastries, cereal, grits, oatmeal, juice, coffee, basically anything you could imagine. And they'd let you miss your first period class to hang out in the cafeteria for it. It was a big deal that everyone looked forward to. The whole school would smell awesome, and all the other students would be seething with envy in their first period classes. Well, my junior year, the graduating class ahead of me decided to stage a massive food fight. There were grits on the ceiling well into the following year, and of course the principal was so angry my class didn't get a senior breakfast. I'm still bitter to this very day. Public toilets. Public toilets teach you that a lot of humans have not mastered pooping and not having it spray all over the walls, and that lots of people like to do the deed in public toilets. I'm in so much disbelief because on the one hand, people can't wipe their own butts, but on the other they can drive 80 miles per hour in organized lanes, 3 times a day, every day for years, and not get into an accident once. While sober, anyway. You should watch the YouTube video of East Asia 4-way streets with scooters. It's insane. It looks like clusters of bees and nobody's hitting each other. Effective over-the-counter medications. When I was in college, NyQuil could knock you out and give you a solid 10 hours of sleep. You'd definitely feel better in the morning. Now, it does nothing. A few losers in the senior class before us took beer and booze on their senior trip, hiding it in shampoo containers in their luggage. They got drunk and got found out, and all senior school trips were cancelled, starting with ours, the class of '83. Thanks, buttholes of '82. There's going to be a few people who get absolutely wrecked by the senior year before them, I reckon. Our one was that the seniors were the only year not obligated to wear uniforms. Then a bunch of them had to go do a robbery and get caught. So my year were the first ones who had to wear uniforms again to help people identify us if we decided to do after-school crimes or something. Thanks, guys. Oof, I've got a really specific one. I went to see the Godzilla head up close on top of a hotel in Shinjuku, Tokyo. It's been closed indefinitely because some absolute idiots were climbing on it and causing too many safety issues, and one of them eventually fell. So we could only look through a window instead. Lame. Okay, it was still pretty cool, but screw those guys. A lot of the archaeological tourism sites like the Egyptian pyramids and Machu Picchu, people kept taking pieces as mementos. Now they won't even let you get close to a lot of them. The Egyptian government doesn't take care of the pyramids very well. It's crowded with hustlers, littered with garbage, and there's camel crap and pee everywhere. They let you climb on the pyramids unsupervised. You're not supposed to go above 3 steps, but you can very easily pay off the guards. It's very common in Egypt. Getting paid off is seen as a common benefit of security jobs. So yeah, tons of graffiti of people scratching their names onto the stones. Oh, what's that? Too out of shape to climb up? Don't worry, they've carved smaller steps into the pyramid for you. Yep, they actually carved into the frickin' ancient pyramids of Giza for the convenience of tourists. Don't let me get started on some of the restoration jobs at other archaeological sites. At Alexandria, they straight up painted over faded pigments. So instead of seeing the authentic remains of pigmented hieroglyphics aged thousands of years, you can see what would happen if a 3rd grader went unsupervised with acrylic paint. So you want to know what a minority of idiots really ruined for everyone else? The remains of ancient Egypt. Leave it to a brain-dead, corrupt dictatorship to vandalize ancient monuments that were otherwise practically untouched since the existence of the frickin' mammoths. In Japan, a couple of teenage hooligans went to a kaiten sushi chain, conveyor belt sushi, and started licking the sushi and condiments while leaving them on the conveyor belt, all the while filming this for TikTok. Now half of all the sushi chains have outright stopped having the sushi on the conveyor belt to be taken. You have to order it for it to arrive. The whole joy of kaiten sushi is to take it as it comes, so this is massively disappointing. This is personal and anecdotal, but in my hometown there was a loading dock, some ledges, and a couple of concrete pads behind a Kohl's or Marshall's. Basically skate heaven, and the manager of the store would let local kids skate back there so long as they didn't scare off customers, weren't drinking or doing substances and stuff. So one day a couple of these idiots vandalized the spot and did a bunch of property damage, and after that nobody could skate back there. We had the BMX version of that in my town. We built a bunch of dirt jumps, and nobody cared as long as we didn't leave trash or make a bunch of noise. A few years later, some kid broke his arm and mom sued, so the city bulldozed everything. I'm an industrial painter. The factory I'm painting in right now has Wi-Fi, but some idiot downloaded 2 seasons of Supernatural on the company Wi-Fi, and now nobody can have the password. In my hometown, KFC would give the cops the day's leftovers, which encouraged the cops to have at least one cop car in their parking lot when they closed and they were taking the day's take to the bank. Another business complained, jealousy probably, and no more free chicken nor a cop car in their parking lot at closing. When I was growing up, the electric company would offer free light bulbs to customers. A local business complained that he wasn't selling any bulbs as a result, so no more free bulbs for anyone. Detroit Edison did that when I was a kid, and yeah, screw that guy who brought the suit. They even fixed things like toasters at the same place. Where I used to live, there was a public park with a big hill, and when it snowed, people would sled down it. A kid ran into a pole and had to get stitches, and his mum tried to sue the city. Now it's against the law to sled down the big hill. We had a park with a pond that had no swimming signs, and a teenager just decided to swim in it. He drowned, the parents sued, and so they emptied the pond, and now it's just an empty pit of nothing like on Parks and Rec. We have people in my town complaining that the previously unused tennis courts are seeing more use due to the popularity of pickleball, and they're actively campaigning against spending the money to repair the courts at another park in town. They're trying pretty hard to ruin it, but there's a lot of pushback. I don't play, but I support people using our parks. Going unsupervised to amusement parks as a kid or teenager. Here in Southern California, Knott's used to allow teenagers and kids to come and hang out as they pleased. I myself have tons of my best memories going to Knott's with my friends. Literally had my first kiss at Knott's. But because of TikTok and a handful of idiot teenagers starting fights and mass panic over non-existent mass attackers, literally some of these TikTok videos are just kids yelling that there's an armed shooter as a joke. So now if you're under 21, you have to have a chaperone looking after you. Honestly, I feel bad for the kids who were fine and now just can't hang with friends and ride roller coasters. If my nephew or nieces want to go, I or another family member has to agree to chaperone them. I don't know, I just think that sucks. My city has a cool waterfall that people were going down to see for decades. Then a couple of old people who should never have been trying to descend to the bottom fell and hurt themselves. Now it's a 10 grand fine for anyone who tries to go to the foot of the waterfall. Same near me. We had some great swimming holes. A teen doing a bit fell in front of it and died. So the government said we're thinking of closing it. This caused a rush of people, and another teen repeating the bit fell off and died too. Now the whole thing has a massive barrier and a fence because the government closed it. Natural culture is dying bit by bit. Airport security. Used to be so easy. You know, the narrator is making this video the day after a video centered on or around the September 11th attack, and so this feels particularly relevant. But wait, there's a follow-up comment.
And the frickin' shoe bomb guy. Shoe bomb guy is the reason we have to take our shoes off, and that's both a special level of irritating and demonstrably doesn't make us feel more safe. One guy with a half-assed shoe bomb, and now I have to make sure I wear nice socks to the airport every goddamn time. Taking off shoes is mildly less infuriating than not being able to take liquids through security, though. People filming themselves licking soy sauce bottles, putting them back, and being little brats in general basically wiped out the concept of running sushis in Japan. It's steered to an order basis only, and it's just not the same. In most of the world, street parties and carnivals. Vancouver just had a Filipino festival where a mentally unwell person drove into the middle of it and ended 11 people. One single idiot ruined the relaxed dress code we pushed for at work. Normally, the company required a blue or grey suit with tie every day. I worked in the creative department, and it took a long time to convince the powers that be to let us wear khakis and a button-up with no tie to feel a little more relaxed and creative. Part of this deal was that we actually had to access the building via the back door and weren't allowed in main client-facing areas. New guy gets hired, and his first Friday, knowing full well the dress code, he wears a ripped hoodie and jeans. That Monday, we were all back to full suits. Screw that guy. What the frick is your job that it requires that kind of dress code so strongly? For a creative department, no less. Consulting for the military, where most, if not all of the senior management were retired military, and that's how they liked it. I got reprimanded once for speaking to the CEO of a client because I was some peon who shouldn't speak to anyone. Little did they know I knew the CEO personally through my parents, and we were discussing dinner plans. My boss tried to invite his way into the dinner, but said CEO shot him down, saying it was a personal visit only. That career is long gone, but it's still a funny memory. I mean, what didn't a minority of idiots ruin for everyone else? My town had a local pizza place that the Barstool sports guy tried to dox. He had his fans flood their page with negative reviews, but the community got behind it and it became more popular than ever. Thrifting. It used to be a place to find reasonably priced items. Now too many people use it as a way to flip items. Every time I go to my local thrift stores, it's 90% stuff from Shine that probably got donated after being worn twice. Which is better than going in the trash, I guess, but it's so hard to find anything older or of decent quality because every other shirt is cheap garbage. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Living in close quarters or using public spaces. Most people are fine, but there's always someone playing loud music with no headphones on the bus or subway, a jerk littering in public parks or putting their half-empty coffee cup on the store shelf and walking away. It wasn't too heavy to carry around when you wanted to sip at it, but now, just gonna leave it right here where it doesn't belong and can spill on someone for the help to pick up. The idiot who lets their dogs run around off-leash and out of control, but yells it's okay, he's friendly. Friendly, but muddy and jumping, and I'm not trusting your judgment. You've already shown it to be poor. Maybe I'm not friendly, or the dog I'm trying to train isn't either. Idiots just ruin everything. At my work, if one person screws up, the whole office pays for it, instead of just reprimanding that one person. It sucks and it's stupid. Why am I getting into trouble for something I haven't done wrong? We call them the cavemen in my town. Citizens against virtually everything. Pseudoephedrine. I just want a good decongestant. But Crystal Labs use that stuff, so now I have to ask for it and it only comes in packs of 12. I'm just trying to unstuff my ears after a cold. REI's return policy.
Thieves and scammers at retail stores. More and more stuff is being locked up and you have to jump through hoops to return a broken product. At my work, we had a team of individuals who'd take turns stealing as much laundry detergent as they could and hauling it out the nearest fire exit with them. We eventually locked up all the laundry stuff, and one of the thieves had the big brass pair to come back to the store a week later to complain about how inconvenient this was. Remember how measles was gone and tuberculosis was on the way out? Yep, I'm 59 and I just had my immunity checked this week. I have none. Now I have to get a stupid measles booster. Frickin' idiots, there's a special place in heck for Andrew Wakefield. Every single fandom subreddit eventually gets taken over by a small contingent of toxic fans or trolls, driving out anyone wanting to have a normal discussion just by attrition alone. Video game, movie, show, book, it doesn't matter. Eventually it just turns into this hate echo chamber over the smallest BS, and people have to create separate subreddits just to share normal opinions that aren't regurgitated hate. It's not just fandoms, it's basically the life cycle of every subreddit. 1. Sub is created. Normal people with interest in the topic join it. 2. The sub grows and more terminally online people start to join because they, quote, found their people. 3. The terminally online folks post or comment or upvote or downvote most frequently and start to drown out the normal ones. 4. Normal people start to realize the sub is going down the drain and they leave because they don't want to spend all day arguing like the terminally online ones. 5. The terminally onlines now drive the sub. They think they represent the community as a whole. They sit around reinforcing their own insanity. 6. A new sub is split off for the normal folks who no longer want to be involved in the original sub. And 7. Repeat. Well, I started thinking about The Last of Us at the start, but then by the end I was feeling it on a personal level as a Critical Role and Star Wars fan. I would have sworn that nobody seemed to hate their properties as much as these, quote, fans, but this last post would suggest that it happens with literally everything. Vending machines in schools. They used to be in the common areas, end of a hallway, strategically placed outside near eating areas, obviously in the cafeteria as well. They weren't all super junky food, there was some nice bagged salads and healthier drinks than sodas. Our school specifically had ginger tea, honey lemon iced tea, and hibiscus tea. Then some kid in our school decided to blow over $500 on just the sodas one week. His parents complained about how easy it was for the children to rot their teeth with the vending machines. Our school had them all removed, doubly incentivized by the fact a school nutrition policy change would be active soon. They were gone by the end of the following week. F you, Jeremy. Most children don't have parents who give them $500 for sodas, ma'am. You touched on part of our counter-argument. Why did Jeremy just have $500 in cash to blow? Sounds like a different problem entirely. In the town where I grew up, there was an epic playground that was made out of wood. Quality craftsmanship and a lot of thought went into crafting it. My dad and his carpenter friend were in the paper in a story about the building of it. 15 years later, some Karen's idiot son broke his arm falling from a part of the structure. She created a petition which led to the playground being dismantled. They put up a multicolored metal piece of crap in its place, didn't solve anything, and broke a lot of people's hearts. They replaced the play equipment at a preschool I worked in. In the 3 years I'd worked there, we'd never had more than a scraped knee. From what I'd been told, there was never a single broken bone. They replaced it with, quote, safer equipment, just because they decided they should. There'd been no incident or injury to cause them to change anything. There was bleeding and bruises and concussions aplenty within the first few days, and a broken bone within the first month of use. Collecting as a hobby. I want to collect Pokemon cards because I like the art and I love collecting cards of my favorites. Scalpers have completely ruined it. The Pokemon scalpers have gotten out of control. It's really telling that even the local gaming stores in my area can't get cards in. Apparently the scalpers hit the online shops so hard that retailers just aren't getting shipments. That's some serious bull, and don't get me started on the Warhammer scalpers. Ugh. The last new release sold out in 30 seconds thanks to the scalper bots. Pitchers of milk left on a sideboard cabinet at a coffee shop so customers can top up. Stingy miser buttholes kept using way too much of it, purposefully ordering drinks without milk and then adding it for free. So most places have done away with them and now we need to ask for more when we need it. Thanks, tightwads. Yep, along similar lines, there's a really nice waffle shop where I live in the UK, and their whole thing is authentic maple syrup. They used to have pictures of the stuff on every table, the idea being that people could add as much or as little as they wanted. The problem wasn't your standard everyday greed of pouring a wasteful amount of sauce on, that was almost kind of the point anyway. People could have as much as they wanted within reason. The refills were often queried. If plates were swimming with syrup and they asked a waitress for more, they'd get challenged on it. The problem was literal theft. People stealing whole pitchers of maple syrup to take home. As if authentic maple syrup isn't expensive enough, replacing the pitchers themselves too was just too much. Now, a standard meager amount per dish, and if you want more you have to ask and pay for it, all because some selfish bunts had to steal stuff. In Sweden, some idiot family let their young daughter play freely in a graveyard, including climbing very old graves, one of which fell and unfortunately killed her. This resulted in government starting a project to secure all gravestones nationwide. All registered grave owners had to pay for this. Cost me €3,000. Social media gave idiots a platform and a megaphone. Almost everything following the invention and proliferation of social media has been ruined by our lowest common denominator. Politics, religion, government, truth, critical thinking, friendship, love, mental health, TV, film, vacations, work-life balance. If there's an app for it, then idiots have ruined it, period. Housing. A relatively small amount of people treating housing as a commodity has effectively doubled the cost of all types of housing. Subway immediately stopped giving sub-stamps and scrapped the whole program just because one dude stole a roll of stamps. Bad dog owners. The ones who don't clean up after their doggos. The ones who let their dogs destroy rental properties. The ones that let their dogs bark. The ones that don't train them. Dogs get banned from so many places because of bad dog owners, and when people like me, who pick up after their dogs, train them, control them, etc., can't take their dogs to certain parks, or when I was young I had trouble finding places to rent because of people who didn't train their dogs. Nuanced political discourse. A minority of bad faith actors turned every conversation into a shouting match where you're either all in or completely against. Now, thoughtful middle ground takes get drowned out and people are too afraid to speak honestly without being labeled or attacked. We lost the ability to disagree without dehumanizing each other. The most important rule I have for my team is that I won't micromanage as long as the work gets done. Despite an already relaxed work environment, there are still those that try to push the boundaries. I ask only that everyone be on point when the higher-ups are around. If you're not busy, at least look busy for frick's sake. Because of goofing off, this led to the entire team getting their hours cut. They had a good thing and someone had to ruin it for everyone. Oh boy, we see a lot of posts from people complaining about micromanaging managers who ruin everything. Well, I generally agree with that position, but here's what happens when you don't appreciate having one of the good ones. Sucks for everyone when you lose that perk. Air travel. Flying used to be a whole experience. People wore suits, you got real meals, there was legroom. Families could walk all the way to the gate and hug you like it was a damn movie. You could even show up last minute with no ID and still catch your flight. Just pull up with a bag and vibes. That was real. Then a small group of lunatics thought hijacking planes was the move. In the 70s, they were jacking planes almost every other week. That's when they started throwing in metal detectors and bag scans. Then Lockerbie happened, then September 11th came and flipped the whole game. Now we're all there barefoot, damn near in the buck, tossing $20 lotion and hoping the TSA dude doesn't hit us with the extra pat down. It only took a few psychos to ruin flying forever. All we wanted to do was enjoy the peanuts in peace. Starting this year, I'm not allowed to have a propane grill because I live in an apartment. About 20 years ago, they banned charcoal. At least with that, I guess you had a literal pile of smoldering rocks for an hour after you were done that could pose a risk, but I miss charcoal burgers at home. The insult of, you're allowed to have a grill but it has to be electric? Motherfrickers, that's a George Foreman on a stand. The original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie sequels. The first movie was incredible, but too many parents complained about the movie being too dark and violent for kids. It isn't. So we got two terrible, slapstick, nonsensical sequels, and no Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie since has ever come close to matching the first one. The real-life examples of why work smarter, not harder, is the way to go. I was working as a stock boy in a supermarket, and when we had to fill the milk cooler, people would bust open a 12-pack of milk cartons and put them in one by one. On my first story, I just placed the 12-pack in the cooler and cut the plastic off on one side with my box cutter and yanked it from under it, and the look of my store manager and the other employee who was training me was pure bewilderment. From that day, everyone did it my way. Start of lockdown, my 9-year-old son was having worksheets emailed to complete at home. One day I left him at the laptop doing his maths while I made some dinner with my 3-year-old daughter. I walked into the living room with his dinner to find him asking Alexa all of his maths questions. I mean, I respected his hustle, but he was actually doing it the least efficient way possible. He memorized the equation he needed to ask, say 327 times 8, walked over to Alexa, asked her the equation, walked back to the laptop, walked back to Alexa to ask her again because he'd forgotten the last 2 digits, walked back to the laptop, entered the answer, walked back to Alexa to check it again. He had to keep walking backwards and forwards because he knew it was cheating, so he'd turned the volume down so I wouldn't hear it from the next room. So while he thought he was being clever, he was actually taking more time to figure the answer out using the Alexa than it would have taken to do it himself. Plus, of course, there's the fact he was working on a laptop that has a calculator and a Cortana assistant that does the same exact thing as Alexa, and he knows how to use both the calculator and Cortana, but still chooses to cheat in the least efficient way possible. So yeah, if he's going to be a cheater, he needs to at least make it less work than just doing the math. Worked as a laborer at a plant nursery one summer. Daily tasks included manually watering 15,000 plants each day, put together a back-of-the-napkin plan to build an irrigation system, and I spent the next few weeks building it up with some money from the boss. That system is still running 15 years later and does all of the work now. I did automate myself out of the job and had to find another eventually. A couple of years later, I got my engineering degree. I'm convinced engineers are inherently lazy people that will spend a disproportionate effort to make things easier.
That is precisely what engineering is.
The narrator missed his calling, at least in terms of laziness. I'm actually not mathematically gifted enough to even pass high school advanced maths, so I could only really pass the lazy criteria. My brother-in-law spent a whole summer trying to figure out how to fix his sagging deck at the lake, which he could in theory crawl under and jack it up. It would have been a tunneling project. It's a 60 by 60 area, all long 2 by 6 boards. Massive. I sat there long enough with enough beers in me to come up with the idea of just cutting a square out of the sagging area about 3 foot by 3 foot, jacking it up and then re-screwing down the boards. He paints the thing every spring with a roller anyhow, so it's not like the square cut shows up. He thought I was a genius. I was just lazy. We had to hold a thermometer in water in chemistry class. It was probably only a 20-minute experiment, but your arms got tired after a couple, and you can't let the thermometer touch the bottom of the pan or it won't get an accurate reading. So instead of sucking it up and just holding the thermometer, my lab partner built a contraption out of lab books and paper clips to somehow hold the thermometer in the water without it touching the bottom. It was the stupidest looking thing you've ever seen in a lab class, and our professor even walked over and said, "If it looks stupid, sounds stupid, but it works, then it isn't stupid." My lab partner and I joke that he wasn't talking about the contraption, but the intellect of my lab partner. I had a math teacher that actively encouraged his students to be as lazy as possible, defining lazy as actively searching for ways to do as minimal work as possible. His logic was that, the way math is now, it could be simplified and still work the same. Someone just needs to be lazy enough to find it. I was a paid intern at a large company during one summer back home from college. My work 95% consisted of using SAP, import to Excel, clean data and generate reports, occasionally creating some tools that someone needed. In the first 2 weeks after getting a hang of my responsibilities, writing all of the Excel formulas needed and basically automating 99% of my work, I was chilling. I went from actually working from 9 to 5 to maybe 1 hour tops per day. Finding, importing, cleaning, and reporting usually took hours, but with all the formulas, it took 2 minutes of clicking. I then helped the other cool intern get his crap set up so that we could both just chill. We could take 2-hour lunches, paid for by the company, and nobody said anything because we were just getting so much more done than the other interns. Of course, I helped for special tasks when asked, but those were simple 20-minute tasks building something in Excel. Overall, it was the easiest, most stress-free internship of my life. The clerk was asked to bring 145 white papers into the office. He doesn't want to count the paper manually, so he printed 145 blank sheets and took them in. Smart. He used a machine that counts as one of its functions, but not the primary function to do the counting for him. It's just enough outside the box that most people wouldn't think to do it at all. Plus, as a bonus, they're all nice and warm. One of my favorite examples is Andy Kim, and I'd like to preface this by saying I don't think Kim is lazy so much as a genius. Andrew Joachim was a singer/songwriter who became famous under the stage name Andy Kim. He achieved success writing songs for bands like the Archies, possibly most notably Sugar Sugar. After his success, he coasted for a while until his record label dropped him for a lack of output. At that point, he created his own label and cranked out hits like Rock Me Gently. When they saw this, the big record labels then bought his label under the assumption that they'd then profit off the songs he wrote and performed. He then very shortly stopped writing songs and largely lived off the sale of his label. Work smarter, not harder. It took me like 3 months, but I automated a data pipeline to extract data, clean it up, and spit it out in an Excel or PDF format to one of our clients. I walked over to shoot the breeze with a lady who handles my client and gives me the tasks, and she told me we make $40K off them every month for that automated job. I was like, frick, I need to go start my own business. When Carl Friedrich Gauss, the famous German mathematician and physicist, was in elementary school, around 1784, his class was assigned the busy work task of adding all the numbers from 1 to 100. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 and so on. This usually kept the class quiet for half an hour or so. 7-year-old Carl was sitting quietly with the correct answer, 5,050, while the rest of the class was just starting. So the surprised teacher asked him how he came up with the solution. He replied that he added 1 and 100 and got 101. Then he added 2 and 99 and got 101, 3 plus 98, and so on. He realized that there was a pattern of 50 pairs of numbers with each pair adding up to 101, and 50 times 101 equaled 5,050. When I was in college, I had a job at an Italian fast food place with a reputation for its breadsticks. They came in frozen and needed a bit of time to thaw, so we'd take a giant 3x4 foot aluminium baking sheet, spread them out in a single layer with no spaces and cover it with a plastic bag, and then leave it to sit in the walk-in overnight. The next day you'd have to get a pair of tongs and move each stick to a new tray, turning them over and then cover the new tray with the bag and let them sit on racks for a couple of hours before brushing on the garlic butter sauce. This was tedious enough that you'd usually be ready to brush the butter on the first tray as soon as you turned the last tray. I was given this task for the first time one morning and just didn't want to deal with it. I realized that if I put the second tray upside down on top of the first one and then turned it over and took the first tray out, I got exactly the same result. Blew the boss's mind when I did the 3-hour job in about 15 minutes. I was given a 5-cent an hour raise. I mean, on the one hand, good on them for actually giving out an immediate reward in recognition. On the other hand, yay, 5 cents. I guess we'll have 40 more cents for gas money after the shift. I was once set to test a certain piece of equipment on a ship. The test involved attaching the unit to a reader, then run loads of command line commands. Then one would have to make a copy of all the text, copy it into Word, and save it as a real crappy-looking report. There were hundreds of units and they needed to be tested several times a year. We did about 20 to 30 a day. It would take several weeks to finish. I didn't know coding at the time, but always wanted to learn it. Within 2 months, I'd made a program, even with a GUI, to spot faults with ease instead of having to actually read the reports. The program could read 3 units at a time and would automatically create a smooth PDF report and save it on our server, named with a serial number and date. The job was now to attach 3 units, then wait for about 3 minutes, detach and attach new ones. Basically 30 seconds of work, 3 minutes break. I could now test all units in a day, though I'd typically spread it out over a couple of days. When I left the company, I left the program on the test computer. I got an email from an ex-colleague a few months later saying they were using the program on several ships now. There wasn't any manual for the program, of course, but it was so straightforward that it wasn't needed. If I need directions, I'm not asking a man with 1 tooth. I'm asking a man with 1 leg. 'Cause he definitely knows the easiest way to get there. Yep, if there's a shortcut, that 1-legged son of a bee knows where it is. You won't be hopping fences, either. I plug clocks in at midnight so they're already set. In other news, I'm exhausted. Eating dinner out the pot so there's fewer dishes to wash. An older company had a person dedicated to data entry, which boiled down to copying and pasting portions of data from text files into spreadsheets and formatting into a report. The person originally doing this job spent a full 40 hours plus a week doing it, but wasn't very computer literate. When they retired, the company hired someone with actual skills. The new hire convinced management to let her work remotely after getting up to speed on the job. The first week at home was spent automating the entire job. The remainder of their multi-year tenure with the company was spent doing whatever they wanted, save the 10 to 15 minutes weekly to run their program and to answer the odd email here and there, all while getting paid full salary and benefits. They actually had to add in a few errors now and then to make it seem realistic. I've worked a few places that have people doing this. Usually when they retire, the job is given to some younger person that figures out how to do it in 10 minutes on top of the rest of their normal job. Your lady scored. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I worked goods in for an aircraft manufacturer as a summer job at university. Parts would arrive, we'd open them and key in all of the details into a terminal. That bit was a bit long-winded. I discovered the terminal keyboard has assignable shortcuts and set up a bunch of them for all the boilerplate such that keying an item in was about 6 keystrokes. Saved myself and my workmate hours every day, which we'd spend pranking each other, other warehouse staff, and staff at other sites. You made yourself more efficient and used the extra time to make your colleagues less efficient? Perfectly balanced, as all things should be. I had a manager in my 20s who detested the fact that I turned a 2-hour process into a 15-minute process. It exposed how much lazier he was compared to me, because when the higher-ups learned from other people at my level that I created the program, they took me aside and told me he took credit for it. They asked me how I felt about that. I told them what decisions they make regarding the manager's character is their decision. Just put yourselves in my shoes and consider it from that angle. They did nothing, and I took the concept to a competitor who invested the money into making the program more robust and proprietary. My name was line 1 on the patent and trademark documents, and I did well enough to semi-retire at 45. I credit Lee Lakosha for the inspiration. He went through a similar problem with higher-ups at Ford, and his answer was to take his brain to Chrysler, who valued it. Worked in a local adult education center. One of my main tasks was to make calculations about how many people enlisted for a course, how many of them got discounts for being unemployed or disabled, how many men, women, or particular age groups and stuff. It was all needed to calculate upcoming courses fees. That was my only work there, and I hated it. This was in the early 90s, so PCs were a thing in our offices, but I had no idea how to write a program or use a database to use this information. Lucky as I am, our center had an interesting policy. When you want to educate yourself, you can attend that class for free. And when it's during the work time, then this is work time. As long as my supervisor is okay with that. And she was. So I spent 3 months studying database structures, scripting and coding and stuff. I told my tutor what I wanted to do, and he helped me write a script that grabs all necessary information from the course's database, copies that into another database, and then I went crazy and wrote code that was insane. I implemented what-if scenarios thanks to filters. At the end, I was able to do my work, that previously needed 6 hours a day, within 15 minutes. I mean, before that, it took like an hour to gather all of the necessary information to have a how many unemployed single-parent women does it need to make the costs of that course? I had to comb the data for everything back then. After my education, if you wanted statistics on how many single-parent disabled foreign women at the age of 80 to 90 are needed for the next 2 years to keep the ornithology course running, sure, no problem. Clickety-click and done. After that, I started the PC in the morning, grabbed all of the data, ran my script, and was done within 15 minutes, and then read the book I'd bought from home. At the end of the day, I gave my supervisor several dozens of paper, statistics, predictions and stuff and said, "Whew, boy, that was a lot of work," and I went home. My supervisor was super happy with me because I did so much more now and was super effective. So there are, as far as I know, a lot of jobs that are essentially copy-paste and counting roles, at least when I was still looking at that sort of admin work in the late 2010s. And apparently the tech to make it into a comparatively effortless task has been available as early as the 90s? Earlier, perhaps? How have we stayed this dumb about this particular sort of work for so long? Yeesh, I wish I'd gotten into even relatively simple programming when I was younger now. Back in high school, a lot of kids used to walk through this park to get home and to school. A portion of the path went into the woods because it was just quicker than walking the actual trail. At one point in the walk through the woods, you had to go up this small but tedious hill. Nothing major, but it took like 10 seconds of hard work to go up it. You couldn't go around because one side was a small cliff to the creek below and the other side had dense trees. One summer, a bunch of us got together and decided to just dig through that hill to make it flat. It took like 14 of us 3 good days to get through it. It was a hard 3 days, but it was definitely worth it. Saved 10 seconds of hill climbing every morning and afternoon, 150 plus days of the year. And it wasn't just us, but hundreds of other kids who took the same path every day. Sometimes you need to put in a lot of work so your future selves can enjoy the easy way out. I was invited to my friend's yearly apple picking. It was a full day of apples and kids and filling a truck for cider. I'm lazy and suggested we make the process more efficient with tarps on the ground. We managed in 2 hours what historically took all day. We didn't even get to the picnic lunch. Essentially, I ruined apple picking. Walkie-talkies. In every job I've ever had, these things make your day a far less labor-intensive task if used correctly. Good God, I wish we had these things. Spent 20 minutes of my coffee break at 3 a.m. trying to call the plant in an area with next to no service so they could let me in the building because my dumb self left my wallet inside. Didn't get my coffee either. In Australia, explorers discovered a mountain that was taller than Mount Kosciuszko, which was thought to be the tallest mountain in Australia. Rather than cause confusion by telling everyone a new tallest mountain had been found, they simply named the new mountain Mount Kosciuszko and renamed the original to something else. The German general Kurt von Hammerstein-Eckward used Hanlon's razor to assess his men, saying, "I divide my officers into 4 groups. There are clever, diligent, stupid, and lazy officers. Usually 2 characteristics are combined. Some are clever and diligent. That places the general staff. The next lot are stupid and lazy. They make up about 90% of every army and are suited to routine duties. Anyone who is both clever and lazy is qualified for the highest leadership duties because he possesses the intellectual clarity and the composure necessary for difficult decisions. One must beware of anyone who's stupid and diligent. He must not be entrusted with any responsibility because he'll always cause only mischief." I have a massive exercise to do at our year end. I work in accounting. My work previously got checked by another manager who spent over 3 weeks going over the data. Eventually, she got shifted into another department, and that workload fell on me. Basically, self-audit and then present the data to the actual auditors. My previous manager was absolutely crap at Excel. I didn't let on, but I did all of the audit on a separate file using simple but out-of-the-way formulas. Not only did I reduce the task from 3 weeks to basically real-time checks, i.e. no time, but when I was told that I had to perform that task as my main duty every month, my job became a doddle. I didn't let on that everything was automated by SUMIFs, indexing, max values, and range checks. I'm living the dream. Sorry if I rambled on. At work, I go through parts and apply 2 different kinds of tapes and 2 different kinds of weave. I finally got the rhythm down, and now I do each part individually and apply everything at once. Everything else goes through an entire order, just applying tape, then goes through it again to do the weave. I asked to use the big table in the back of the shop and just put all of the tape and weave tools there, and did all of the parts at once. Normal rate for an 8-hour shift is $1,200, but I can manage $1,800 in a day going at a nice, steady pace. I can't say what products we make, they're too recognizable and Googling it would reveal where I work and live. And thanks to being a hard and fast worker, in my superior's words, the uppers leave me alone at the table in the back. They look the other way when I have an earbud in one ear, and they don't notice that I scroll Reddit or read a lot. I knew a guy who had a very low-level data and reporting job. He had several daily and weekly work responsibilities, including a bunch of reports that needed a bit of tweaking from raw data to finished product. But like I said, low level. We didn't find out until way later, but he'd set up macros for each of his major responsibilities where he could. Once set up, he'd just run the macros to do his work, but then he'd, smartly, hold off on delivering the reports until just a little before the deadlines. He'd hit every assignment and was seen as reliable. He'd also complain about the workload so people would leave him with that work. I doubt he did a full hour of work a day after he set up what he did. Eventually he left the job for one with better pay. But damn did he work lazy. Also, he was smart not to reveal until the end, because if he'd told them about it, he would have gotten a pat on the back and would have been given a whole other workload on top of maintaining those macros. The guy milked the job, not the other way around. Yeah, we're getting far enough down the list of answers that it's almost all data entry jobs that concealed just how much they'd automated their role now. I find it pretty satisfying in any case, and just insanely jealous that I never got one of these roles. Now let's share one with a cautionary tale of why you don't show your hand when you find this solution. I knew a guy who did this, but he revealed it. The company shared the macros with all the employees. It made everyone else's life easier, but they also got an increased workload. The company made a lot more money, and this guy got none of it. He didn't even get promoted. One of my favorite stories from my youth was The Tale of the Man Who Was Too Lazy to Fail. To quote, "I got fed up with handwriting itemized suborders at work, so I set up a spreadsheet that you can just fill out. Then I got tired of having more than one program open and not being able to search with and among those order sheets. At least not automatically or easier, so I'm having our FileMaker guy integrated into our greater ordering and invoice system. I was frustrated at the pointlessness of sorting a giant pile of paper invoices from an unpaid stack to a paid stack every month, so I just used the accounting software to keep track. I became so irritated with having to fill out a multi-page printed spreadsheet for every single order, sometimes just one item 2 pages in, and frequently there'd be those pesky itemized suborders, so I condensed the items into the most used and put them all on one easy-to-read sheet, and encouraged my coworker to simply write out the more uncommon items at the bottom. Basically, I hate paperwork, and paper invariably leads to busy work. I've tried to reduce the use of paper in our office, but I haven't been entirely successful. We have to have written order forms available, because sometimes the orders are coming in too fast to be able to type it all quickly and correctly, and have to keep some paper records for things like organic, FDA, and USDA audits. But all in all, I'd say my absolute hatred of filing has reduced busy work here by at least half. Doctors confess their most cringe moments with patients of the opposite gender. My classmate and I were at a free clinic performing our first ever pelvic exams on standardized patients. Classmate's a big woman pillager of a man and gets to go first. He proceeds to just insert his fingers to palpate for the bimanual exam. Our poor standardized patient shrieks right away. She promptly states that for all women's sake, he's going to need to use one finger for those procedures from now on. One of my friends was getting a physical for a high school sport, I believe, and when it came time for them to check his twig and berries, the doctor says, cough, but apparently my friend thought he said hop. So here my friend is standing there, the doctor has my friend's boys in his hands, and my friend just jumps. He said it was the most embarrassing moment of his life. My granduncle is a urologist, and I got rigid downstairs from checking out one of his nurses when I was around 12. I then had to explain why I couldn't drop my trousers for an examination. He asked if I wanted to go to the bathroom to do something about that so we can continue the examination. I had no idea what that particular act he was suggesting was, and he explained rather vaguely to me the gist of the operation. I didn't feel like trying it, so we just sort of waited until it went away. I don't know if it was awkward for him, but whenever I think about it, I cringe myself into the fetal position until I can block it out again. I had to put a Foley into a male part. I'm young and female. He seemed nervous as I started. Right when I was about to insert the catheter with his wee-wee in my left hand and the catheter in my right, he abruptly asked if it would help if he was rigid for the procedure and proceeded to gain some girth before I could answer. I then said no. Doctor here recently walked in on a new mother in a sitz bath with 2 chest pumps gulping away at her, all while her husband grins from ear to ear as I worked her up for a pubic bone injury. The newborn could sense my embarrassment. If it makes you feel any better, when I had my son, I couldn't have cared less if Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade trooped through my room. All sense of modesty went right out the door, and I cared F all who saw what part of me during my time in the hospital. If you were there to help me, have at it. And thanks for all you do, Doc. We appreciate it. We're taught to explain to patients exactly what we're doing as we're doing it. Delicate wording becomes important during female pelvic exams. Instead of, okay, I'm going to place the speculum inside now so you'll just feel some warm pressure, my buddy ended up saying, okay, I'm coming inside you now. The female patient responds, oh, no thanks, I've already got 3 children. Yep, I imagine the sheer irritation alone would lead to me using the most clinical possible terms just because I'd get sick of all of these sorts of lewd jokes. I'm not a doctor, but a pharmacy technician. About a year ago, a young woman comes in very upset and turns in a prescription for a bunch of anti-anxiety and antipsychosis medications. All's going well until I realize we're out of one of them, and I have to tell her I have to order it for the next day. She was okay with that at first, but when I see the tears building, I ask if she's okay, and she says yes. So I continue typing up the prescriptions. I wanted to say there were about 8 or 9. Next thing I know, she begins crying. She starts telling me that she's just been released from a psych ward and she tried to end things a couple of weeks back. She rolled up her sleeves and her arms were covered in a lattice of scars. She began to ask me if she thought she'd ever get reaccepted to nursing school because apparently they kick you out after getting admitted to a hospital for psychological symptoms. I had no idea what to tell her except I hoped she got in and that if she worked hard, they should give her a chance. I know this might all sound hollow, but I wasn't prepared for that. Nothing in pharmacy tech training told me how to react to this. So this was definitely my most awkward moment with the opposite gender. I'm a nurse, trying to insert a catheter on a guy with a microdiddle or an inverted one for that matter. When you get a vasectomy, you get your Johnson taped to your stomach. A nurse came in to do the finishing after the procedure. She was middle-aged, and I'm guessing she probably got into nursing late because she was looking really nervous and uncomfortable, and anyone who's been in nursing more than a few years has had hands-on eggplant experience. She's kind of tentative and unsure about pulling the tape off, so I say, "Go ahead, it's been through a lot in its time." She got a big smile and ripped that thing off of there, so she's totally cool in my book. Third year of medical school on my family medicine rotation, which I'm doing on my med school's campus academic health center. Electronical record shows a 24-year-old with chief complaint of cough. So I go in to interview her, where it comes to light she's really down there for downstairs itching. Finish up the interview and tell her I'm going to grab my attending for the pelvic exam. My attending tells me she'll let me do the pelvic if the patient consents. I'd already done OB and gyn at this point and was quite comfortable with it. But we both agreed that I'd likely get asked to leave the room altogether. Lo and behold, the patient consents, I do the pelvic, we write her a script for some antifungals and she goes home. 2 days later, I'm teaching a small group of first-year students how to perform an abdominal physical exam. Teaching's a requirement for the family medicine rotation. Then, during introductions, I come face-to-face with my patient who never mentioned she was a first-year student. We both play it off really cool at first, but during the session, her partner asks me to show him how to do an ingenual femoral hernia examination on a female patient, aka his partner. While I'm doing my exam, she breaks out in hysterical laughter, which causes me to lose it and start laughing at the absurdity of the situation as well. She played it off like she was ticklish, and I said something stupid like, "I thought of something funny, don't mind me." 2 weeks later, she returns to the clinic for a follow-up and I go see her. We talk for a while about how she's feeling, how awkward our second meeting was, and then just shoot the breeze for a bit. And then she goes, "So, when are you going to take me out for dinner?" I politely declined and explained I had a girlfriend at the time and I never saw her again. In short, I did a pelvic exam on a girl who ended up being a fellow medical student, though 2 years behind me, and she asked me on a date at her follow-up appointment. Nice bedside manner, you'll go far. Maybe not deep, but definitely far. My perspective may be off the scope for this group of stories, since I'm a veterinarian, not a medical doctor. In my experience, people who don't want to neuter their male dogs are always males. Having a frank discussion about the benefits of neutering with someone who's emotionally attached to their dog's testes is pretty awkward. My first pap smear was at the Planned Parenthood when I was like 15. The male doctor got me positioned and then turned around to grab the speculum and said, "This is gonna be cold, quack quack," in a Daffy Duck voice and using the speculum like a duck's bill. Oh god. Not a doctor, a student rad tech. Had a patient for a regular chest x-ray series, but she was coughing up sputum. I asked her if she wanted a tissue to cough it up into, and she said she didn't spit, she was a swallower, and winked at me. I'm 19. She was 98. Working in ED at a large hospital without any pediatrics or OB-GYNs. Just about to finish night shift when I'm asked by a nurse to quickly see an 18-year-old with abdominal pain. I was exhausted and didn't want to pick up another patient, but I just had a weird feeling. Went to see her. She was a thin girl lying in bed under the covers in the fetal position with her worried mother nearby. I ran through a brief history and was about to examine her when she stated she needed to go to the bathroom. She looked to be in a lot of pain, so I asked for a nurse to escort her. At this point, the patient, her mum, and myself thought it was a burst appendix. Next thing I know, the nurse yanks me down the corridor and shoves me into the bathroom. Before me stands a thin 18-year-old girl bearing down in a squat with a now noticeable baby bump, repeating, "Don't tell mom, don't tell mom, don't tell mom." I throw her into a nearby bed and charge into the resus area, leaving the mum unbeknownst in her cubicle. I grab my boss, who goes white and starts shouting, "Why is she here? Why is she here?" Understandable, we're not the obstetric hospital. We run back in, by which time she's fully dilated and pushing. We successfully deliver a beautiful baby boy whilst constantly freaking out about the lack of pediatric supplies. We didn't even have clips for the umbilical cord, but we improvised. Throughout this time, the girl is either pushing or begging us not to tell her mum while we keep saying, "She drove you here, you can't hide a gosh darn baby." The girl wanted to keep the baby, and ultimately we convinced her to tell her mum. I told her mum her daughter was safe, but there was something I needed to show her. The look when I brought the mum into the resus room was unlike anything I've ever seen. Anger mixed with concern, mixed with joy, mixed with confusion. What a crazy frickin' day that was. In short, some doctors structure their careers to avoid babies and vajayjays, but you can never truly get away. Oh my god. Well, maybe that's the universe telling you to change your calling. But seriously, I hope that girl and her mum were able to sort things out in a way that was best for her and her new kid. How much important prep and planned parenting did that girl miss with keeping the baby under wraps? Being a resident in Saudi Arabia, there's a huge stigma attached to male attendings examining female patients, especially those with gynecological issues. Also, being a foreigner residing here, some customs and practices catch me completely off guard at times. That being said, I was once in charge of my consultant's OPD during an OB-GYN rotation, said consultant having left early thinking all major cases and appointments had been dealt with, and left me to clean up any stragglers in the last hour. In walks a 40-ish-year-old mother with her 18-year-old daughter, both completely covered from head to toe in coverings, who then proceed to throw a tantrum about how the consultant wasn't there for her appointment, and how she left a male resident in charge of the OPD. A cursory examination of the daughter's file didn't reveal any history which would have helped me decide if my superior should get involved. I then began to try to talk her down, asking her what the appointment was about, and how I was in charge of the department. I didn't dare reveal that I was just a lowly resident. I reassured her I'd do everything in my power to help her out with any issues her daughter had been having. After a lengthy conversation, I found out that the daughter was there for a virginity verification, because she was to be engaged and subsequently married off that month. And appointments in my hospital's OPD are a real hassle to get. They needed to present that certificate of virginity along with some other things regarding finances, genealogy, and a few others to the prospective groom during the engagement ceremony. I went completely numb, detached, and examined the poor girl silently. She was in the stirrups, undressed from the waist down, and burqa above that. Not even an eye slit. I discovered, for the first time, a stack of thick, extremely official-looking certificates in a desk drawer to be given to women who passed the examination. I've since performed that exam close to 30 times and have seen quite a few females who didn't have an intact, shall we say, maidenhead for YouTube, and who actually sobbed quietly in shame during the examination. I try to explain to the family that the rupture of this particular thing is in no way a sign of promiscuity or even any bedroom interaction. To those people who I know wouldn't understand, I just certify their daughters' virginities and tell the girl to come up with an excuse later to their families. Damn, if someone tells on me, I'm going to be facing one hell of a malpractice suit. Idiots are idiots everywhere, no matter what country. You would not believe some of the crap that happens in India, Pakistan, or even China with women. This is a product of ignorance and plain patriarchal stupidity, with vanilla selfishness at its center. I might have seen some crap, but I've met some amazing people too, with infinite love, wisdom, and courage in my days working in Saudi Arabia. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? Not me, but a fellow classmate in medical school. We have mock exams and various people will sign up to be patients. They get paid a decent amount. So he went into the mock exam room and started the basic history and physical of the fairly attractive female. Did this and that pretty standard stuff, grabbed a tongue depressor and had her open her mouth. Then, nothing. He did it again, and said with bewilderment, "Oh, that's weird, you don't have a gag reflex." She smiled and gave him a coy wink. He just about lost it and couldn't finish. He walks out and finds the preceptor who monitors the exam while rolling on the floor laughing. As for me, I never really had an overly awkward experience other than maybe knowing someone, which can make certain exams a little awkward. But wait, I've just thought of one. I was in my OB-GYN rotation and this young redhead came in for warts downstairs. Let's just say that the curtains matched the carpet and, pun intended, she was a bonfire down there. So me and my preceptor at the time were looking for warts in the forest down there. We'd find one, freeze it, and find another, freeze that. I get lost in the moment and forget where I was, as I was a student and hadn't yet fully developed a professional composure. I saw one and said, "Oh, I found a big one too." Realizing what I'd said, I looked up from between her legs as she looked down, and we locked eyes. The embarrassment in her eyes is something I'll never forget. I felt like a giant jerk. I was the chaperoning nurse. Young doctor, first week in the OB, and was seeing an early pregnancy patient in triage. Doctors usually say, "I'm going to put my hands on your V area now," or "You'll feel the speculum on your L lips." Obviously, they can use much more specific language than we can use on YouTube. He was rattled and so nervous that he conflagrated them as, "I'm going to put my lips on your vajayjay now." The patient and I roared with laughter for a second before we controlled ourselves. He shakily kept his dignity and kept right on going like nothing had happened. He never referred to it again for the 4 years he was there. General surgeon, 31-year-old female for context. I work in a county hospital taking care of very salt-of-the-earth patients. These are my people, as I was also born with a plastic spork in my mouth. Talking one morning to a young man who was about to get his ingenual hernia fixed, and his only question to me was, "Well, when can we do the deed again?" The only person with him was his girlfriend, who was smoking hot, so I broke him the bad news. Well, you're going to wake up feeling like a horse kicked you right square in the junk, so go ahead and do what you want when you feel you want to, but it's not going to be today. We get him to the OR, put him under general anesthesia, and then a very new, very young, very pretty female nurse starts to prep him. To those unfamiliar, this involves rigorously scrubbing down the downstairs area, including all the associated extremities and hangers-on, with what amounts to a sponge on a hollow stick that dispenses a compound that decontaminates the skin somewhat. As soon as she starts scrubbing, the patient pops a rager. He's completely under and paralyzed, mind you, but the more she cleans, the bigger it gets, and yeah, this kid was a shower to begin with, I tell you what. Poor thing. This nurse's face just gets redder and redder, and it gets bigger and bigger, and everyone's giving her crap the whole time. I finally stop her because I'm afraid any second he's going to break, scrub, and contaminate my field. We do our best to drape around old Ron Jeremy. It was hard. My poor, married with kids and straight as far as I know, male resident had to keep batting the damned thing out of our field during the whole case. Afterwards, I made sure to reiterate to the hot girlfriend that he probably wouldn't feel like doing the deed in the near future. She asked me point blank if it was okay if she went south of the border on him, and I told her to go nuts. He asked me the same question when he woke up from anesthesia, and when I gave him the same answer, he gave me a knuckle bump in reply. God, I love county folk. Okay, are you sure you didn't operate on an actual horse? In seriousness, I guess it makes sense on why they were so fixated on this particular post-surgery activity now. We used liquid nitrogen to freeze downstairs warts off a 20-something-year-old girl. After she touched her warts with her hands to show me where they were, I applied cryotherapy and left the room for a moment so she could get dressed. When I got back, she proceeded to grab my hand and shake it, after touching all of her warts, without washing her hands. I could have gotten drunk off the alcohol absorbed through my skin from the amount of hand sanitizer I used after that particular incident. Patient here. I was in a small town where my parents used to live and I had to see a gynecologist. I was worried that I might have a tampon stuck in my vajayjay. And public service announcement, that's not physically possible, but I didn't know that at the time. Unfortunately, the only doctor that I could see was a friend of my parents. After thoroughly probing and peeking, he informed me that there was nothing wrong. In fact, your downstairs is, for a lack of a better word, gorgeous. I've never been so embarrassed. I had to babysit his kids that weekend. My pediatrician used to substitute his old male doctor sometimes without notifying anyone. It was almost always the days I was coming in for my sports physical. That feel when you're going to get your hanging swimmer's storage touched by a lady doctor in your early teens and then seeing an old man snapping latex gloves on. I had one patient who made her desire for me very public, but since I treated her entire family, I decided not to kick her out and continued to remain professional. In the midst of a bipolar mania, she kept complaining of female issues. During her pelvic exam, I happened to look up and I saw a gigantic smile on her face. After the exam, in the hallway in front of the few residents, she said, "If you weren't my doctor, I'd F your brains out." Perhaps I should have mentioned this earlier, but she was the only woman I've ever met who was a 0 out of 10. She's the only patient who made me question my heterosexuality. Somewhat related, but from a patient's perspective. When I was in nursing school, I went to my school's student health center for a gyno appointment. The doctor asked me if it was all right if a medical student was present, and I said that was fine. She then specifies the student was male and asks me if that's still okay. I wasn't totally comfortable with that, but as a nursing student, I knew how much it sucks when a patient refuses you, so I said yes. Lo and behold, it was an incredibly attractive med student from my school who I bumped into all the time, and he saw inside of me. I never could look him in the eye after that. A lot of people are commenting that he or I should have refused. Look, I didn't actually know the guy, I just knew him as a hot stranger, and I think I became much more aware of his presence after this occurred. When I was 16, I sometimes got dizzy if I stood up really fast. I'm pretty sure this is relatively normal, but my mum thought something was off with me. So she took me to the doctor and he wanted to check for testicular cancer. I had a worried look on my face because I didn't want an old Asian man feeling my berries. The doctor saw my face and thought it might console me if he spoke teenager. He said, with his thick Asian accent, "I'm gonna feel you up downstairs." I felt pretty awkward after that. Was it Ken Jeong by any chance? I'm not a doctor, but I'm a nurse that mostly deals with wounds. I had a patient once who suffered from Fournier gangrene. And please don't look it up if you don't want to wash your eyeballs out. He'd already been through surgery and reconstruction with skin grafts to the whole area, and I was seeing him twice daily to redress some residual but substantial open areas around his downstairs equipment, down the sides of his groin and thigh, up his abdomen, and on his scrot. In short, the guy's equipment had recently rotted away, been skinned down, and then had donor skin from his thighs stapled on. At any rate, as I'm scrubbing away, my face about a foot away from his painfully swollen and misshapen bits, he becomes rigid. I wouldn't even notice because his edema was so bad. It didn't even occur to me that it would happen because I was scrubbing the open areas and jamming Q-tips under bits. He moaned and I asked if he was in pain, which he usually was, and he goes, well, no, it's just different. That didn't even clue me in. The wife had to mention something. Ugh, well that's just frickin' great. My doctor once said, "You're so thin it's easy to palpate your organs." And then he felt my spine from the front. It was awkward. When I was in nursing school, my lab partner was a Kenyan marathon runner. He was so skinny our teacher used to use him as an example all the time because you could literally see his heart beating through his chest in his intercostal spaces. And where his lungs were a little overdeveloped from running, he could take a deep breath and you could almost see the outline of his liver. He always had to take his shirt off and let people prod and grab him. ER in Brazil. 20-year-old woman receives a knife cut in the chest. Slices both of her mammary glands across. Superficial injury, but it needed stitches. No plastic surgeon. It's a sus ER in Brazil. We started the procedure. You like them, don't you? If you make them pretty again, you could play with them all you want. The nurse was mortified. This would go on for 45 minutes. As soon as the next doctor on schedule arrived, I was ending the stitches and referred her to the other doctor, and I noped out there. They say nothing's ever lost online. But here's what I've been searching for since 2005. Around 10 years ago, I was using StumbleUpon and I found a website outlining a mysterious expedition into a New England wood where a portal to an alternate dimension allegedly exists. Something about a group that went into the portal and never returned. Something else about an upcoming expedition to follow the first. The alternate dimension is in America, much like our own, but uncolonized and pristine. There were even schematics to a sort of chair that made the trip easier. The most curious part to me was the direction for finding the forest and then the expedition group. Something to the effect of, if you've found this website, you've either been searching for us for a long time or you're meant to find us according to the will of the universe. If you're to continue your journey, you'll be able to solve the riddle hidden in this page. If you can't solve the riddle, you're not meant to find us. I'd be lying if I said this didn't pique my curiosity and I've been looking for the website ever since. I've attempted to figure it out with StumbleUpon and I swear I bookmarked the page, but no such luck. This one comes from my mum. A Canadian anti-smoking cartoon from the 70s or 80s where a guy is smoking and says, "Oh, I should quit. This'll be my last cigarette if I see a woman in a fur coat." And one immediately walks by, so he says, "Wearing green shoes." And then one does. And then, "Walking a dog. On a diamond leash. Actually, it was a tiger." And then a woman in a fur coat wearing green shoes walking a tiger on a diamond leash walks by. He crushes his cigarette up and the tagline goes, "What will it take for you to quit? Been looking for it for ages. Haven't been able to find it yet." A quote from a book, maybe Lundy Bancroft, about how to get a friend out of a bad relationship they're trapped in. I want the original source. I believe it was in a Q&A format that ran a bit like this in ideas, but not phrasing. Question: my friend is in a problematic relationship, but she won't allow us to help her leave it. How do we safely get her out? Answer: you don't. You need to offer her the opposite of what her partner is offering her. Choices. Allow her to socialize with whom she wishes, even the guy taking advantage because he's probably isolating her. Forgive her for being flaky because he may not be. Allow her to choose for herself even if you disagree with the choice, because that's the opposite of what he's doing. She has to decide to leave by herself. The night that Tony Hawk did the first 900 back at the 99X Games, they played a music video-like thing with Feeder's The Perfect Day, showing all of his misses and then finally the hit. It basically doesn't exist, and it bothers me. Okay, this was written 6 years ago, so I'm going to go out on a limb and say that if somebody hasn't seen this gentleman's comment and encoded the VCR they taped the event onto and sent it to them, the internet is a lot less magical and all-encompassing than I believed. This old French website that posted these pixel clip art versions of Disney characters. Because the outlines were single pixels wide and there was no compression, little me could save them and recolor or edit them in MS Paint easily. I basically made a whole drag-and-drop dress-up game in Paint using their Tinkerbell and Jasmine. Like, I don't have much use for it these days, but I look for it occasionally just for nostalgia purposes. Last time I used that site, I must have been like 12. It's been well over a decade. An Antique Roadshow episode where the appraiser asked the owner if they'd cleaned a priceless Milanese helm, and they responded with, "Yeah, I hit it with a little lemon pledge," and the appraiser visibly shivers. There was a quote that I read on the title of a post that went something like, "Just because you've gone down 90% doesn't mean you can't go down another 90. It's related to the stock market and can also apply to life. I've wanted to find out who said that for the longest time. That song that I can kinda hum but I only know one word to, and to Google song lyrics plus love would clearly be ridiculous. An electric copy of the automatic weapon dealer's Bible, which I bet a coworker years ago I could find. In an effort to prevent myself from owing him $5, I'm still looking for it. Back in the 2000s, I was eagerly awaiting the release of the latest Harry Potter book. At the time, there was a theory going around that a copy of the book was released for Bush's kids to read or something like that, and it had leaked onto the internet. This led to teenage me searching high and low for it and finally coming across a downloadable 600-page book. I spent days reading it on my family's PC. It was amazing and I had it early. It wasn't until Harry and Ginny did the deed together for the first time that I realized I was probably not reading the real book. Still, it was good. I finished the book and I was shocked when the real one came out and shared a lot of similar storyline, minus the doing of the deed, of course. My first dip into fan fiction. In 2003, there was a commercial for, I think, E-Trade, where a CEO retires and hands his company over to his green herb-medicated bro-grandson, whose entire press conference is him saying, "Oh, I'm so stoked." Everyone dumps the stock immediately, and the ad was about how quickly you could trade using E-Trade. My family loved that commercial to the point where we had shirts made that said, "I'm so stoked." I've looked through a lot of commercial compilations in YouTube, but I still haven't found that ad. I didn't find the commercial, but I did find an old forum post searching for the same thing. Either you've been searching for a long time over multiple accounts, or you're not the only one wondering. I spent about 10 years searching for a woman I went to university with. I lived with her for 2 years and we were good friends. She just wasn't too hot at being contactable. Like the sort of person who loses their phone every few months, so they just get a new one with a new number. Anyway, she had zero web presence, so it was practically impossible to track her down. But I figured maybe one day she'd make herself known. Well, one day she did. Turns out she got married and had a young kid and lived about 3 hours away. We spoke on Facebook for quite a while, and I thought I'd see if she wanted to meet up sometime, and then she died. Turns out she just made a Facebook profile to contact her old friends one last time and see how they were doing. She never even told me she was ill. Sometimes she pops up in my dreams and we have a chat there. There was a Reddit comment about a person who didn't know they had schizophrenia until they moved. When they lived in their apartment, they had a noisy neighbor, a radio that kept playing in another unit, and they could hear their upstairs neighbor constantly walking across the floor. But then they moved to a standalone house and they could still hear all of the noises from the old apartment. I remember the phrase insidious schizophrenia in there somewhere. Very haunting and well written, but I haven't been able to find it again. All the crappy Fruity Loops music I made in my early 20s that was on MySpace. This video I think I found on Vimeo of these guys working at a glass pipe shipping facility. Apparently a customer requested a video of the process of putting together their new order for shipping. These two guys put together a great video with them dancing to Maniac by Michael Sembello throughout it. I'd love if anyone could find what I'm talking about. Where the quote, "I wanted 16 candles, Molly Ringwald, not pretty and pink Molly Ringwald," comes from. An American, I think, movie that I saw as a kid about a girl in the country and her cousin? A guy that was in a wheelchair that refused to go out. 90s, maybe 80s. Lots of golden hour scenes and bright photography. It was primo, baby. Thank you for everyone who wrote into me about it, though. I'm now inundated with answers. Around 12 to 13 years ago, I got into StumbleUpon, which was a Firefox extension that adds a button to your screen that takes you to a random page that someone marked as interesting. Once I found a flash animation that portrayed a recreation of a white hat hacker doing a penetration test on a web application. The whole thing was a Linux command shell without any GUI. It started with an IRC chat where someone asks the hacker to look into his application and sent him a URL and another URL for the source code. After a sped-up 3 minutes of curl, grep, and SSH, the hacker built a command line script that can pull any username and email from the site. Never found that again. I can't help, but kinda wanted to relate. StumbleUpon was revolutionary in the late noughties, especially since you could tick off the kind of content you're into and then take off clicking without any kind of community surrounding the content's curation. My grandpa used to have this screensaver idle screen on his computer, and it was a little painter or window washer guy who goes around the screen cleaning and painting. As a kid, I'd watch it for hours. I thought it was super relaxing. Pretty sure it was light blue and the little guy was wearing all white. Not sure of any other details. I tried to find the browser games I played when I was a kid. Some of them no longer exist. I sank an embarrassing amount of hours into Flash games as a kid in the early 2000s. I remember a website called Addicting Games, which would post new games every day or week or something. The internet before big streaming sites like YouTube was weird. Yeah, honestly, this was how the narrator spent his teenage years before YouTube took up all of his time as well. Miniclip was my go-to platform though. I've gone there just now, and it still exists in some strange form. I'll have to go check it out after I'm done working on this, although realistically, that kind of thing just doesn't have the same appeal to me in this day and age. All through school, they taught us you can never truly delete anything online, and even if you delete it, someone can still find it. While this may be true if you seriously teed off a master computer hacker, for the average person, this claim is completely BS. I went on a few dates with a girl a few summers ago, and I really liked her. Then, all of a sudden, she just vanished. Like her Snapchat was deactivated, completely disappeared off Facebook, Instagram, everything. I tried texting her a couple of times, but she never responded. I got a little worried because she's not the kind of girl to just ghost like that, and she struggles with thoughts about self-deleting and other mental health issues, so you can see why this might be concerning. Since she wasn't responding and I didn't really know any of her friends to ask about her, I went full social media creep mode to try and find out at least what happened to her. I figured if she'd ended herself, there'd at least be something online about it. Well, I didn't find anything, like literally no evidence that this girl even existed besides a picture of her on her brother's Facebook page. I didn't even know she had a brother, he was just the only person that came up if you searched her name on Facebook. Googling her name also yielded no results. Since I could literally find nothing about her online, I figured she'd just blocked me for some reason, and I eventually gave up. I tried searching on her Facebook a couple of times over the next year or so, but nothing ever really came up. Then this past summer, she popped up in my Snapchat friend suggestions, and honestly, it was such a relief to finally see some evidence that she was alive. I added her, not expecting her to add me back, but she did, and she actually messaged me. We met up again and went for a hike and grabbed dinner together to catch up. Turns out she was going through some rough times and didn't want to talk to anyone, and disappeared, but she's doing much better now. Things didn't work out with us romantically again, but she's still one of my closest friends now. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? The Tianator. It would take any web page and change it to seem like Mr. T had written it. It was so funny to see it do news sites like CNN. The page is on archive.org, but of course it doesn't work anymore. During some in-depth discussion on Lord of the Rings lore, the conversation turned somewhere deep in the appendices or in some additional notes of Tolkien's, to the future of Middle-earth, specifically of the hobbits, hundreds of years after Elisar's reign. He, as you may remember, designates the Shire a protected area that men cannot enter. As time passes, these rules are gradually forgotten. The men encroach upon the hobbits' land, forcing them to become more secretive and reclusive. Their culture suffers. They forget their music and books, their cookery and their stories, and become like animals, hunted by cruel men for sport. The passage ended with the notion that hobbit kind had not been seen for many more years, though there was a chance they could be deep in hiding or that they'd forgotten what they were. It was depressing as F, but this discussion took place online in about 2009 or 10, and I haven't since been able to find the source. I recall wanting a source and being given one, and I followed the links and confirmed it myself, reading the depressing passages although not committing the exact text to memory. Was it a Lord of the Rings appendix? A separate letter detailing the Hobbit's sad future? It could have even been Chris Tolkien's musings, I honestly don't know. I've wanted to refer back to it in the years since, but as I say, I can't find it. The only line I remember with clarity was the "hunted by cruel men for sport" line. I've got you, pal. But how canonical this Doom of Hobbits is debatable, as this comes from one of the half-baked notes collected in Unfinished Tales, and given Tolkien's habit to constantly tweak and polish details, you never know. The exact quote is, "The much later dwindling of the hobbits must be due to a change in their state and way of life. They became a fugitive and secret people, driven as men, the big folk, became more and more numerous, usurping the more fertile and habitable lands to refuge in the forests or wilderness. A wandering and poor folk, forgetful of their arts and living a precarious life absorbed in the search of food and fearful of being seen. For cruel men would shoot them for sport as if they were animals. In fact, they relapsed into the state of pygmies. The other stunted race, the Druidane, never rose so much above that state." The full series of Pirates of Darkwater. I can't find it anywhere. A flash animation video of O.J. Simpson playing golf and killing small animals, talking about how the liberal media has besmirched his name. Photos from meetups in early 2000s from a game I used to play. I think nearly all of the photos people took ended up on sites that don't exist anymore. A desktop wallpaper I had back in 2009 to 2010. It was some digital art of a female with her face sticking halfway through a vertical waterline with a goldfish floating about. Her hand was also in the frame, and I think she had gold hoop bracelets on. It was such a dreamy piece of art. I miss it. Local bands from the 90s. None of that music is anywhere. There was a VH1 show called The Rock of Ages in the late 90s and early 2000s. They filmed one episode in my house, and my two oldest kids are in the episode. I've never been able to find it online, and I know it aired because we watched it when it did. Google search brings nothing. It's like the whole series didn't exist. An extremely baffling video I saw maybe 7 or 8 years ago that shipped Daisy Duck and Jafar together set to Love the Way You Lie. I just need to know that that exists and wasn't some fever dream. My writing portfolio. I spent 6 years writing for a now-defunct sports team's website. Some of the stuff on WordPress is still around, but the rest is gone. There was a song that played on the radio in 2004. Alternative rock station 105.7, The Point in St. Louis. The song was either called Unchained or the band was called Unchained. I heard it maybe a couple of times. I've never been able to find the song again. Any band called Unchained has never put out the song, nor has any song called Unchained been the right one. It's frustrating. If I do hear it again, now 15 years later, I'm not 100% sure I'd recognize it. I diddly do, neighborino. Maybe not the exact thing, but was it Unchained Faded? I found it on YouTube. How dare you just come out and find this song an hour later? Admittedly, I hadn't looked that hard, but yeah, this is definitely it. It would just occasionally cross my mind that I knew there was a song I'd heard in high school that I couldn't find again. Okay, some of these are legitimately hard to find or actually gone, but there have been quite a few like this, maybe with solutions that I didn't post for the sake of brevity, that have literally been solved with one person just Googling, YouTubing, or in one case, a frickin' Bing search. Don't get me wrong, we rely on people writing long answers for this job, but the fact that people are waxing poetic for entire paragraphs in their answers instead of just searching a couple of keywords does make me laugh. Yo, this girl posted to Reddit years and years ago about having to be hospitalized because she used a spicy sausage to have fun with herself with. I've got no idea how to find that. Okay, I found it. Here's your answer. A lot of backstory, the cringe is at the end. Funny though, worth it. My high school best friend, let's call her Hillary, approached me about having fun with herself. Apparently to her, I was the expert on all things related to doing the deed, as I had a boyfriend and I'd gone south of the border on him 1.5 times. I told her my technique. You just rub it till it feels good and don't stop. She showed me that month's Cosmo. Find your best O ever. We read the article and she tells me she had tried with her fingers to no avail. We decided it needed to be stimulated with something more like an actual member. We, mind you, we are very experimental 16-year-old girls, decided to try it with hot dogs that night at my house. She comes over, I go to the fridge, and we only have spicy kielbasa. I show her, and we decide to still try but to cover them in the appropriate normal rubber protection. We sit on my futon, slide our pants or undies down, throw a blanket over our laps, and I remember thinking, am I sure I want to do this? But I hear her moaning, so I plunge ahead. It hurts, and it's burning, and I feel weird. At that moment, my mother bursts in drunk and starts screaming at us. She insists we're doing illegal substances and questions the blanket over us. I finally convince her to leave and remove the sausage. Hillary hands me hers and I go to throw them in the wastebasket. That's the last thing I remember. Hillary says I passed out and she got my mother. They called an ambulance and the EMT was grilling Hillary about what we were doing. I wasn't breathing, my mum started ranting about taking substances, and Hillary panicked and told them what was going on. I wake up in the hospital to my father, who can't look at me, my mother, who can't stop laughing, and Hillary in the corner beat red. There was a doctor explaining that I have a latex allergy and had broken my maidenhead, causing anaphylactic shock. In short, I played with a Trojan-covered spicy hot dog and nearly died, and my whole family found out. Okay, I don't know if anyone will be able to find this, but it's worth a try. Sometime around 16 years ago, I was hanging out with friends and they decided to put on a horror movie. I was almost certain it was on Netflix, but I could be wrong. The movie was an Asian horror, but I can't remember which, though I think it was Japanese. The plot was interesting in that it was about an actress who gets a role in a movie about a real-life murder that had made the news years ago. The actress plays the girl that was murdered, but she's great at the role because she was the girl that was murdered in her past life, and she's reincarnated. So creepy stuff and memories flood back as she's filming the movie. Anyway, I've looked up everything I could find and I've found absolutely nothing, so I'm starting to think the movie doesn't exist. Somebody tell me it does? Okay, thank you guys. Update, it's called Reincarnation from 2005. You ever have a vague memory of something and thought it might just have been a dream, but then discover a video or pictures of it later and it feels surreal? That's how I felt just watching the trailer. This one is a personal grudge now because they won't email me back. The website www.aviva.ca. Up until maybe 2014 or so, it had a smooth jazz with saxophone playing in the background. I absolutely loved it, and I would frequently just go to that website and just listen to it when I was feeling down, and maybe look at cute cats too. They remodeled their website years ago and the song went away. I've emailed multiple times to multiple addresses on the site with no luck. I even spent time skimming through smooth jazz YouTube compilations looking for the song. I miss it. About 12 years ago, I was on a random chat site and scrolling through profiles. Never spoke to anyone, and suddenly I found a picture of myself. But it wasn't me. I looked and looked at the picture, and the only reason I knew it wasn't me was because the clothes this person was wearing were different, and I didn't own anything like that. But other than that, this was my twin, from the shade of the teeth right down to the eyelashes. Jawline, smile, nose, everything. Even the smallest of details were identical. I couldn't send a message to tell them because their profile was blocked for messages. I saved several pictures from the profile to my old PC, but lost them when we got rid of the computer. I really wish I still had those pictures. Really wish they had message enabled so I could tell them about it too. This one computer game I played as a kid. I remember very little of it, but it was one of the things I remember most of my childhood. It would have been circa mid-90s, Windows 95 era, and it was a ROM game or something that came with the computer. All it was these little scenes you could choose, and then you click on different things and they become animated. The one I remember most was a creepy castle scene. You click on a window and a pair of red eyes appeared in it. You click on the sky and there'd be thunder and lightning. If anyone has a recollection of this, please let me know. This is my biggest internet white whale. This reminds me of Launchpad Desktop for Kids, which my mother installed on my computer at some point. Oh my frickin' god, this is it. Thank you so much. Enjoy! A sculpture of Santa Claus sitting on his throne with a glittery but otherwise empty removable snow globe on a pedestal next to him. I've searched for years. All because young me accidentally broke my mum's brand new expensive Christmas gift. The lies we told as teens, and how our parents totally saw through them. In back-to-back sentences, I asked my dad if he monitored our internet history, and if paying for things online showed up on his credit card statement. I was convinced I'd successfully pass these off as just two harmless, unrelated questions. My sister once tried to dramatically reveal to my parents that I'd been doing the deed with my partner since I turned 16. My mother responded with, "I know, I may be old, but I'm not deaf." I remember being in 3rd grade and discovering I could erase math problems from my math book. Yeah, Mum, the book came like that, with those massive empty spaces between the problems. God, I was an idiot. When I was in my high school, I'd smoke green herb and do the old towel under the door trick. Of course, my parents would call me out on it being there and would make comments, but I was pretty sure I had them tricked with the incense that I was burning. Then one day I must have pushed it too far by taking gravity pipe rips with my buddy. I hear a stern knocking on the door and an, "Open up, Derek, we need to talk." My friend and I, in our incredibly medicated state, were going, "Oh god, oh god, oh god." And in my genius I stammered out, I can't. We're undressed." This is followed by an, "Oh?" We came downstairs awkwardly 30 minutes later and my dad and I never spoke of that moment again. In short, my dad knows that I smoke green herb in bedroom with my friend. I turned the tables and make it more awkward for my dad to talk about it than it's worth. Okay, reading these others gave me the frickin' chills thinking back to when I was 13 to 15 and I had to whack it off all the time. I'd go into the bathroom, turn the fan on, turn music on, and act like I was going number 2 for 20 minutes. While I cranked it to a dirty birthday card my dad had gotten a few years prior. As if that wasn't obvious enough, when I actually did go number 2, I didn't turn the fan or music on and it only took me 5 minutes. Gosh darn it, I'm not looking forward to talking to my parents next time. I typed in undressedwomen.com. Of course, I used the word beginning with N instead of undressed. Bloody YouTube. So I typed that into the family computer's search browser when I was like 9. Brother and Dad entered the room and I exited the page thinking that was that. Dad pulled up the history and found it, and I told them I meant to actually type in nuclear weapons, not NAAKD women, since I was into guns and stuff. They said okay, and I thought they bought it. Can't believe I was this frickin' dumb. See, Dad, I'm not looking at undressed women. I'm just researching how to commit the most deadly domestic terror attack on American soil ever. Honestly, I think some extremely conservative parents in the US would be alright with that trade-off, don't you think? When I was about 13 and discovered adult material online, I didn't know about internet history. So there were about 10 websites, all under names of hotwomen.com or banging.com, and when my dad asked me what the F I was doing, I just came up with, oh, it's those stupid internet pop-ups. Every frickin' time.
That's actually quite funny.
My father pulled that one on me 3 days ago. I woke up in the morning, entered the living room, he tells me he's found something awesome on eBay, switches the screen from TV to PC, and I see women-on-women action going on. Those pop-ups are getting more and more ridiculous. Well, for me, my parents left every weekend from Friday, late Sunday to spend time on their property that they bought out in the country. Every weekend from the time I was 13. So naturally, my house became the party house for me and my friends. My parents would tell me, nobody can come over during this time. So my girlfriend would come over and stay the night. We'd have parties of more than 20 people in my quiet suburban house. Probably had the cops called around 5 to 8 times. I knew the main patroller's name and he knew my name and house. Every Sunday I'd clean, like a madman, the entirety of the house. I'd mop, I'd vacuum, I'd dust, I'd take out the trash, I'd dump hundreds of bottles of beer and booze in a public dumpster about 15 minutes away. I'd comb the yard for torn pieces of beer labels, bottle caps and stuff, and if someone threw up, I'd get shout and clean that sucker out. Only twice did I think I was caught. Once when my dad found a mixer with a preloaded Cosmo under the sink, which apparently some drunk girl had hid there. And then again when I'd mistakenly placed the table decoration in a completely wrong way on the table runner. For the Cosmo, I could claim ignorance and say it must have been the housekeeper who comes every other Friday. And for the second, I fessed up and said me and the boys played some poker on the long table while they were gone. No repercussions. Fast forward 4 years and I'm graduating college, talking with my parents, and I made the mention that I used to have some parties while they were gone. Occasionally, to which they laughed. Yeah, we know you had parties. We got called probably 5 times by the cops and about 40 times from the frickin' Joneses, our neighbors, complaining about your parties. Plus, Bob, every Sunday we came back to the house and it was cleaner than when we left. Oy vey. That's probably why they never told you they knew. If you knew, you wouldn't have cleaned so well afterwards. My family's house was 3 stories tall, the top floor being one big room that spanned the length of the house. Me and my girlfriend at the time would have mad monkey bedroom fun all day, every day. It was right after high school and we were both unemployed. We'd try to be prepared, as in if someone were to come up, we had a blanket to throw over us and stuff. One day I was downstairs while she was on the 3rd floor and it sounded like the frickin' ceiling was caving in. I went back upstairs and asked her if she'd been jumping around or something, and she said she'd just been walking around. I realized then that my parents had definitely heard us effing every single gosh darn time. They never said a word or came upstairs. That reminds me of a good friend who told me she'd got rug burn on her back from having intense fun in her room, which was right above her parents'. Her parents wouldn't have even mentioned anything if the burn weren't sticking out from under her midriff top. They used it as an opener to say something like, "Honey, we hope he didn't hurt you. It sounded rougher than usual last night." I had a huge house party when my parents were gone. I moved all of the breakables into bedrooms and locked them so that nothing was broken or stolen. I took before photos so I'd remember how to arrange everything afterwards. When they returned, my mum was all, a few things seem off here. There were like some statues in a cabinet. In that moment, I thought I'd outwitted them, but they definitely knew. My brother and I got busted twice. First time, they said, "The house is too clean. You wouldn't have cleaned like this unless you had a party." Second, the house was averagely cleaned, but why are there muddy footprints on the windowsill in the living room? When I was at the tender age of 14, a rather aggressive girl took to me and she'd sneak over, sometimes without informing me she was coming over, while my parents were away. One day, we decided to go up to my treehouse where I used to read when I was younger. My dad came home early from work, the one freaking time in his life he ever did that, so he panicked. My treehouse was situated right over an alley with a good 12-foot drop over the fence into said alley. So she decided to jump out of the tree into the alley, forgetting her shoes in the process. I hadn't been in that treehouse for years, so I knew my dad would be suspicious if I just strolled out. There, under the blanket, was an old copy of The Hobbit, so I grabbed it and went in. Instead of just walking to my room like I should have, I decided to have a long, engrossing conversation with him about the plot of The Hobbit. To convince him that's why I was up there. Only thing is, I'd never read The Hobbit, but I knew my dad hadn't either, so I came up with the plot for The Hobbit right on the spot. It was no Tolkien, but I think my plot was pretty damn good. I came to find out years later in passing conversation with my mum that my dad in fact loved The Hobbit. He'd seen the girl jump out of the treehouse and listened to my fake retelling of The Hobbit because he was too awesome to care that I had a girl over. In short, came up with a fake plot for The Hobbit to convince my dad I wasn't with a girl in my treehouse. As a nerd, I'm appalled that you used our Lord and Savior Tolkien to cover up your sordid bedroom dealings, but as a formerly desperately hormonal teen, I kind of envy you. If only you were as good at describing the whims and limitations of Middle-earth eagle travel as you were at making girls fall in love with you. You'd be the king of both worlds. I stashed adult mags under the bathroom sink, with all of the cleaning supplies. Nobody will ever find them. I'm honestly shocked at how much they didn't know. I tell my mother stories now and she's horrified that she had no idea what I was up to. I was a terrible teenager, or maybe a great teenager depending on how you look at it. Attention, all teenagers who smoked, your parents knew. What sucks is when you don't smoke but your friends do. So sometimes I smell like cigarettes, or maybe I'll leave a butt or two on the porch, and telling my parents, no, I don't smoke cigarettes. It really just doesn't sound very convincing. I was brewing prison hooch. I innocently asked my mum, a biologist, how alcohol is made, and she explained in full detail the process of fermentation. I then asked if we had mason jars, then baking yeast. Then I started squeezing gallons of fresh orange juice. I had a friend refill the vodka in with water and put it back in the freezer. Frickin' idiot. My sister did this. Drank half a bottle of vodka, filled it up with water. My parents were more mad that she ruined the remaining half bottle of good vodka. I just thought of the most horrifying thing my dad has found. On our family computer, around age 13 or 14, I opened a Word document and typed everything that I'd do with a girl in the bedroom, and at the bottom I typed what I wouldn't do. The list of what I wouldn't do had number 1, doing it in the vajayjay, and 2, butt licking. The list of what I would do had everything else, including doing it in the butt. As I'd later find out, I didn't save or close the document. I went into the computer room about 3 hours later to discover my masterpiece had been minimized on the bottom. My dad had been on the computer for at least 1 hour in between. At least they knew I wouldn't get a girl pregnant as a young teenager. I love how we do crap like this as kids. In case I forget later, here are the bedroom acts I am or am not willing to perform. Oh man, I wrote some song about chicks. Something about, we're gonna get some chicks, we're gonna lay their eggs in front of us, and a bunch of other lyrics that revealed I was woefully ignorant about human biology. I recorded it, of course, on my sister's cassette recorder, of course, and she played it for my parents, of course. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? I drank a 6-pack of beer one time and put the caps back on. I told them the beer had evaporated. I'd sneak outside for a cigarette, put perfume on, and I was convinced they couldn't smell it. And I'd come home, blazed out of my mind, and tell them my eyes were red because of allergies. Middle of winter in Canada. Not much to be allergic to there. Right after high school, I skipped a year of college and started working at this restaurant. There were a couple of us out back smoking cigs when one of the younger hostesses said she had to go and asked what she should do about the smell. A friend handed her a bottle of perfume, and 5 of us watched in horror as she opened her mouth and sprayed it down her throat like a bottle of Benanca. That's when I knew this hostess might just be stupid enough to do the deed with me. Splooging in or on my socks and then putting them in my dirty clothes basket. Forgetting who washes my clothes. Having 3 boys, I think my mum had probably seen her fair share of specimen-covered socks and underpants, and for that reason alone, we as a family are more lenient when she talks during the football. My mom made me start doing my own laundry when I was 13, and I just realized why. Sorry, Mom. On-demand adult films. Hundreds of dollars worth. This was before the age of digital cable. We'd call a 1-800 number to unlock the adult movie channel for a block of time for a set price. After a few seconds, your cable box would flash a code like XX51. I forget the letters, but 51 was the unlocked channel. So I'd call it, crank it, and then finish. Then I'd call the cable company and ask, what is XX51 and why is it on my cable box? And they'd tell me, oh, you ordered that channel for 6 hours or whatever it was, and I'd say, no way, I'm the only one here and I'm only 14. They'd reblock the channel and take the charge off the bill. Every night I'd excuse myself from dinner early so I could tickle my pickle, and I'd announce to everyone, yeah, I'm really tired so I'm just gonna hit the hay, don't disturb me. I really liked doing the cyber deed and rubbing one out in the process. I thought I was slick. In retrospect, I probably wasn't since the PC was in our family room. I'd also acquired a small collection of vibrating adult toys by the time I was 16 or so. I made the mistake of leaving one in the shower once, and it mysteriously ended up back on my desk. My parents never said a word. I smoked a lot of green herb all throughout high school. I'd come home with fire truck red eyes and eat half the food in the kitchen, but my parents never confronted me about it, so I thought I was so slick. About a year ago, I'm 24 now, I figured it had been long enough to let them in on my little secret. They just laughed and basically said, "Yeah, we knew, but you kept your grades up, so we let it go." Whoa, talk about the most chill parents in the world. If your grades were that high while you were on all of that wacky tobacco, were you actually some sort of genius until you dulled your brain back to just being pretty smart? I smoked a lot growing up too. I noticed a pattern where my mum would say I smelled like Mary J, and I'd react defensively, and she'd know. Inversely, one day she accused me of smelling like Mary J, to which I replied calmly, "Maybe it's because I just crapped my pants." That managed to perfectly diffuse the situation. I was really just dosed up on Mary J at the computer eating some Starbursts. My mum walks in, says hi, and asks what I'm eating. Look down at the candy, very confused. "Okay, you've got this. It's strawberry flavored. It's called I'm eating Starberries." My mum stares at me. "Okay, sweetie." Nailed it. I was not a good student in Hebrew school. When you did bad on a test, you had to get your parents to sign off on your exam. Well, I saw something on the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air that I thought might work. Basically, Will needed a signature on something and told his uncle that he could analyze his signature if he liked. So he got people to write their signatures on a piece of paper, and then when it was his uncle's turn, he lifted up the top sheet and made him write on the bottom sheet, which was his test that he needed signed. It worked on the show, so I figured why not try it in real life. And guess what? It worked. Playing Game Boy Color with the lights off after my parents left my room. I was such a rebel. That's the reason why I cranked it with my doors wide open, for everyone to see. Trust me, nobody wants to walk in on you tickling your pickle. I'd come home late at night with sunglasses on, thinking I was so smooth, now realizing just how frickin' stupid that was. When I first realized you could find pictures of undressed ladies on the internet, I asked my mum how to spell Naked. I was sitting at the computer with what I shall assume was an air of anticipation about me. My dad grew tired with me spending so much time on the computer, so he bought a program called Kids Watch or something like that. Its purpose was to make it so I could only access my machine at certain times of the day, without a monthly time limit. So I used to just screw with the BIOS when I ran out of time, and he caught on eventually and passworded it. I thought I was pretty sneaky when I popped the CMOS battery out of the motherboard to reset the password, and continued to mess with the date settings to circumvent the child locks, but he probably knew. That's so much more clever than what I did. Our version was kid-proof, and it would put a timer on. We had 2 hours of computer time. At about 1 hour 59 into those 2 hours, I'd open everything I could. 12 Word documents, 14 browsers, 3 games, and then I'd hold down the power button. The computer wouldn't have enough time to save my use time to kid-proof, and then when the computer restarted, I had my 2 hours back. I thought I was hot stuff back then. Mine isn't very exciting. My mother would prepare all of these carefully arranged party trays of food for Christmas or Thanksgiving, and I'd eat as many of the delicious things as possible, and carefully arrange everything else a little further apart to cover my tracks. I would steal liquor from my parents' cabinet in high school. They didn't drink it, so it must have been fairly obvious to them when the bottles they'd get as gifts would work their way down from almost full to almost empty. I also had a bad habit of drunk dialing them when I went to college for the first month or so. They never said anything about that either. The only time I actually got a lecture was when I was downloading Porno on the family computer. It was in the mid-90s and the JPEG files had to have taken up a full 1/3 of the computer's paltry hard disk before my father started looking for what was eating up the valuable space. Lesson learned. I stored them on a zip disk instead. Next time you talk to your parents, I dare you to ask them this question. What did you do that you thought you'd covered up well but they actually noticed? And of course, report back here with stories. I'd do this, but I know that one of them would be about cranking it, and I just couldn't take that. I'd sleep over at my ex's all the time, which my father would have flipped out about if he knew. So he'd ask me, the morning after, what time I'd gotten home the night before. I'd lie and say some outrageous time like 2 a.m. because I knew he was asleep then. He'd say okay, and the topic would be over. I later came to realize my dad woke up before me for work, so he'd see my car wasn't in the driveway in the AM, making it obviously clear that I didn't come home. My situation was the opposite of this. Around that age, I spent a lot of time locked in my room, tying up the phone lines all night with a dial-up internet connection. They accused me of being some kind of adult website monger, when in reality, almost all of that time was spent learning things about programming, Linux, which ultimately got me the job that paid for college right out of school, and maintaining a long-distance relationship with the person I eventually married. And sure, sometimes I was whacking the mule, but not as often as the other things. You know, as much as you had a right to be offended by your parents' nosiness and accusations, you have to admit that with just about any other kid, they would have been right on the money. Most of us were using our family PCs for evil. I've told this story many times. One day when I was about 16, after an exhausting day at a forensics tournament, a couple of friends and I decided to smoke some herb at about 2 a.m. We didn't have a screen, so I grabbed one from underneath a sink in my bathroom. We loaded up the pipe and decided to hotbox my bedroom. We thought as long as we had the window wide open and blew our smoke out of it, all would be fine. After we were good and lit, I heard a knock at my bedroom door. My mum enters, asking if everything's okay. I chuckle and say, yeah, and she leaves. I thought, hell yeah, she didn't even know, and I turned back to my friend, who has a look of absolute horror on his face. He says something like, dude, she knew we were high. She was so mad. I didn't think she was mad, but after about 20 minutes, I thought I should go upstairs to my parents' bedroom, say hello, and test the waters. As an excuse to go up to their bedroom, I grabbed my copy of Dean Kunt's Intensity and one of those fortune teller fish. I thought my mum would like the book, and what better time to give it to her than 2:30 a.m. on a Sunday morning. I creep upstairs so I don't wake up my 10-year-old sister. I slowly open the door to my parents' room. It's pitch black and they're asleep. I tap my mum on the shoulder and I say, hey, I wanted to give this to you. And I hand her the book and the fish. She grabs them, puts them on the nightstand, and rolls over and goes back to sleep. I then left the room thinking she had no clue and that we'd gotten one by her. She freaking knew. The whole house had to have reeked like a ganja greenhouse, and my cotton mouth was so bad I couldn't get 2 words out without smacking my dry gums together. What are you doing, Johnny? Quickly minimized the adult website I had open on Internet Explorer 6. Oh, nothing, Dad, just reading up in Carter for my history project. You gotta see the speech they have. So cool. Okay. Don't waste much time though, son. Looking back, I'm sure glad that Dad didn't corner me about the smut I was definitely and obviously watching, even though he clearly knew. Dated other guys. I'm gonna go hang out with Amanda. I actually had a friend named Amanda, and my parents later told me they had a joke for it. Yeah, a man, duh. You won't believe what people leave in rental cars. Rental agents confess. I was a detailer for Budget and Avis while I was in college. I can think of a few what the frick instances. First, we had a 4Runner come back with banana peels everywhere. Not just a few, I'm talking dozens. On the floorboards, hanging over the backseat headrests, stuffed in the door pockets, like Donkey Kong himself had been driving it for a week. There was the time we found a used glass pipe, the kind people do crystal with, under the back seat of a Silverado. Then there was the one time we got a one-way rental from another location dropped off with us late one night. The rental agent told me that when she checked it in, it reeked of number 2. Upon my inspection the next day, I found someone had smeared some kind of accident on the driver's seat and left smears of human feces all over it. To make it worse, we had a customer who wanted a one-way rental back towards the car's original location immediately. So I had about 15 minutes to clean it. Just do the best you can, is what I was told. And finally, the worst by far was the road construction company that rented a Corolla for a month. That was the only car that I wasn't able to save with a little work or time, and it had to be taken to a professional detailer. There was tar and asphalt stuck to the floors so thick that you couldn't even tell there was carpet underneath. Tar smears all over the steering wheel, shifter, dash, door panels, seats, headliner, and all over the outside too. On top of that, there was a bad vibration while driving, like the wheels needed to be balanced or the car needed an alignment. We took it to Midas and they ended up digging several pounds of asphalt out of the backside of the front right wheel. I worked as an MT for Enterprise about a year ago, and I rented a van to a lady and her husband so that they could move their son into college over in Colorado. They seemed very normal and down to earth. Upon return, they didn't mention any problems they had or anything that rubbed them the wrong way, and the van was basically in pristine condition. It had been a newer van when we rented it to them, only about 1,000 miles on it. A week later, the wife calls back claiming her and her family had gotten lice from our van, and the lice infected their home, causing huge losses of clothing and furniture, and the house needed to be fumigated. Apparently, the sand on the floor of the van had contained the lice, which had then hopped onto her and her husband's heads. It had to have been our van that was the source of the lice, and apparently couldn't have been any of the hotels or motels they stayed in at the week they were traveling to and around Colorado. The wife threatened legal action and a bunch of other stuff. She gave us repeated calls with tears and everything. When nothing came of it, we were all, what the frick, and just forgot about it. A while later, the husband came in to us with his tail between his legs, apologizing, saying his wife had lost it when their son moved out and had since been prescribed medication. It was super bizarre. I guess all of that passion, energy, and devotion from motherhood had to be transferred somewhere. In this case, getting a moderate amount of money back for a rental car that she'd apparently rubbed her head on the floor of. In seriousness, there is a legit level of pain that this woman was clearly struggling with. Call your parents, folks. Empty nest syndrome is real hard. Former Alamo agent here. I had an 18-year-old try to rent a car from my store, and he was denied because he had no credit card and was too young. His father came in and rented a car. He was told his son couldn't drive. The car was not returned, and we found it on the kid's college campus outside of a dorm dining hall with a sign in the window that said, "Put all garbage here," with the windows rolled down. It had been there for a week, and it was full of half-eaten food, rotting milk containers, and just the foulest smelling crap imaginable. The first tow truck company refused to tow it away because of the stench. They refused to get near it. Entire interior was replaced, and it still didn't cure the smell. The area manager claimed it was damaged in a flood, and we junked it. I can still smell that car 15 years later. Former Hertz agent. One of my best substance dealer customers would return her luxury car every week to swap out a new one with a $50 bill inside the contract for me. It was great until it wasn't. The last rental she ever got was a luxury SUV that was returned to our possession from police impound with 12 bullet holes and $6,700 worth of damage. I hated having to DNR her. DNR in this case is do not rent. Otherwise, no, I still wouldn't have resuscitated her. Ew. I went with a friend to rent a car. When they went to walk us to the car we rented, there was a car that had just been returned with a bunch of dents, scratches, broken mirrors, busted windows, the works. I went to ask the rental clerk about it, but my friend piped up. She tells me that this car was parked about a half block down the street, and some crazy lady chased a guy out of her house with a golf club and did a number on the car. My friend was surprised to see it here at the rental place. Later on, the story came out. The guy who rented it was dating a crazy chick and wanted to dump her. So he rents a car with full insurance to drive over to the crazy's house, and he dumps her. She flips out, wrecks the car, and he returns the car to Enterprise. I understand the rental insurance company is going after the ex for felony vandalism and restitution. Former Enterprise car prep guy here. We had a regular customer and frequent renter return his car saying he ran out of wiper fluid while driving on the highway. He goes on to tell us the story about how he pulled over to the side of the road, peed into his own personal Nalgene bottle, and then proceeded to pour said fluid into the wiper fluid reservoir so that he could clean the windshield. My boss replied with, "Wait, what?" And he goes, "Oh, don't worry. I just ran my Nalgene bottle through the dishwasher, so it's no big deal." A buddy of mine found a kilo of smack. It was in a small backpack hanging on the backside of the seat. They called the authorities and they arrested the renter when he came back for his backpack. A buddy of mine once found lice in the carpet and blood stains in the back seat. We'd think it was a cat or a possum that gave birth. A former famous rapper had a shootout on the highway after the concert. We returned 3 of the 5 vehicles that were involved. All of them had multiple bullet holes, blood, the whole 9 yards. Also had an up-and-coming boxer rent regularly from us. He'd rent multiple vehicles and let his entourage drive them. We found rubbers, dirty clothes, magazine casings, and ashes everywhere. Substances in the back, and they had the audacity to question the detail fee. I'm not a rental agent myself, but I'm pretty sure I made a few of them say, "What the frick?" at the DFW airport once. I took a wrong exit out of the garage and went over the tire strips. I made it about a half mile before I realized what had happened. I needed to get my team back to a client in Austin, and I didn't have the time to mess around. So I turned the car around and drove the half mile back and drove right into the return area on 4 flat tires. And they were loud in that garage. The worst part was a little kid who walked by the car and asked her mum, "Mom, what did that guy do to that car?" And the mother pulled her away. The agent came over with a "you're an idiot" look on her face. I said, "She's running a bit rough and pulling to the left. Do you have another car I could have?" She wasn't amused. A little paperwork and I was on my way again in another car. My company's insurance took care of it, but it was still quite embarrassing. I worked at a small firm at the time, and of course, word and photos of that car spread across the whole company. There are pictures taken by my laughing team members who were in the car with me. The first is me filling out the claim form, the second is the agent doing her part on the form, and the third picture is me getting the new car from the other agent as I get the keys to the replacement car. You'll note the agent I was telling the story to was laughing pretty hard, while the other agent had a pretty good, "What the frick kind of idiot are you?" look on her face. Former truck rental guy here. We had a cube van, the kind made for deliveries, returned overnight. When we discovered it in the morning, half of the bench seat was covered in brown throw-up. Keep in mind that this was returned by a contract client, as in a business that rents from us almost daily and at any given time has 5 to 8 of our trucks in their possession. It wasn't just some random guy. Oh, I've got a couple. First, we had a lady return a car that she had had for a weekend that was littered with pistachio shells, sunflower seeds, and cigarette butts. I'm talking pounds of sunflower seeds and shells, and dozens of cigarette butts, and a cup full of cigarette ashes. She only had it for a weekend, and it was absolutely disgusting. We ended up charging her a cleaning fee of $250 after her return, but my boss made me clean it before we took it to the detailers. And then we had a couple of shady guys rent from us every week or so, and they only wanted a Nissan Altima. Every time, just an Altima. 3-day rentals, and they always came back smelling a bit like green herb, which was semi-normal. A couple of times, though, the back seat was loose, as if they'd pulled the seat off and put it back in to hide something. After my boss transferred stores, I refused to rent to them because I was sure they were trafficking stuff with our cars. I work for Enterprise currently, and just 2 days ago, someone returned a car with bite marks on the side. Naturally, we were all thinking, what the frick? It turned out that a horse had attacked it and then taken chunks out of the metal. Safe to say we're charging the horse owner for the repair costs. I mean, I think you should have charged the horse, but I can see why you didn't pursue that particular form of legal action just for the sake of actually getting paid. And that's not the first time I've heard of a horse doing this. It's called crimping or cribbing or something, and they seem to have left their teeth marks in cars all over the world. I rented high-end cars for travelers in Europe. You know, Benz, Ferrari, Porsches, and Lamborghinis. My favorite stories aren't quite returned, but here they are. The first was a client outside his hotel with his Ferrari waiting for our rep to come pick up the car. Random guy walks past and says, "Nice car." Our client says, "Oh, are you here to pick it up?" And the random guy says, "Why, yes. Yes, I am." And he just drives off with our Ferrari. We require special insurance and paperwork before we let you take our expensive cars into Eastern Europe, because they tend to vanish over there. Guy renting an S-Class Benz never tells anybody he's going to Eastern Europe, and at the border gets turned around because the paperwork he has doesn't allow the car in there. He totally loses his mind and proceeds to ram through the border crossing and lead the cops in a car chase until he gets arrested. Then he called our 1-800 number to blame us for his incarceration. Then, of course, is the common stupidity of people that happened so often that it lost its WTF factor. What do you mean I have to pay the speeding tickets I get in Europe? I didn't know that the huge sticker on the keys, gas cap, and gas cap cover saying diesel only meant I couldn't fill it up with gasoline. And then you've got the used Johnnies and random underwear that we pretty frequently find as well. I once found about 60 hardcore gay adult magazines in the trunk of a rental.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius?
Worked for Avis Rental for about a year. We had this one guy who'd keep renting the Chrysler 300 for an extensive amount of time each time. He then decided to pimp the car by buying those black tinting wraps on the car for the windows. We knew that he was a substance dealer and we don't really care as long as he pays. Another story that relates to that particular Chrysler is when it was returned and the tires were effed. When I say effed, I mean not the flat tire deflated kind of story. I mean the tire rubber was shredded and the entire tire was literally warped to the point that it doesn't even look like a tire. More of a cone shape if I remember correctly. We assumed this guy had to do a donut to show off to his stupid buddies that he has a Chrysler 300. Worked as a service agent for Enterprise for about 1.5 years in Austin. The worst was this van that a guy bought back after having it for 3 weeks, and it seriously smelled as if something had died in there, and that he'd driven it out to a river and left a rotting corpse in the van half submerged. We opened up the van for 1.5 days, and you could still smell it from 30 feet away. Anything closer than 5 would have you gagging. There was half-eaten food in it that had probably baked in the Texas sun, and the guy had left it there to fester as if the van was a large petri dish for him to grow his moldy, fungi demon creatures. Some unknown substance that looked half solid, half goo had packed itself in underneath the passenger seat, and we couldn't figure out what it was for the life of us. There seemed to be dog dew smeared on the dashboard and all over the panel, and some red stuff all over the wheel. The car had to be doubly cleaned by a third-party detail service we hired, and they spent about 6 hours cleaning that van out, using surgical masks and rubber gloves. The engine itself was effed up, so we had to take it to the dealership where they worked on it for about 2 weeks, when we usually got them back in like 2 or 3 days. Though knowing that smell, one can understand why somebody would be hesitant to work on it. We let it air out for 3 weeks after that before renting it out, but you could still smell that lingering scent of all things unholy. Somebody left a gat on the front seat. Oh, sweet. Free gat. As a renter, my favorite was when we were renting cars to drive to a test range where we were testing tow missiles in the desert. And on the way there was a short, dry lake bed. So of course we raced those bad boys. One day a storm had blown some rocks off the hill, and my buddy drove right over one at a good 90 mph plus. Ripped out the bottom of every single fluid-carrying thing, the radiator, the engine, transmission, differential, gas tank. The car went about 100 feet after the rock and then just died. Oh, frick. We didn't have off-road coverage. We towed it out to the highway with the rock, left skid marks with another car, dropped the rock, poured out the appropriate fluids, dropped the car, and called the rental agency. They gave us a new car, but they kept their eyes on us for the rest of that contract. Oh, and about those tow missiles, we bought them. It's amazing what you can get when you're a defense contractor. They didn't have warheads. These were just test shots. Basically big, heavy fireworks that didn't go boom. I worked at Enterprise a couple years ago as an MT. I'd go back and help the service agents clean cars on slow days. Worst thing we found was literally number 2 smeared on the back seat. About a dozen empty cans of Monster on the floorboards. One of the seats was torn. Not too bad, just a pocket knife-sized thing. Trash filling every orifice the car had, and cigarette ash and butts in the cup holders. The whole car smelled of butt, cause, the crap, and cigarette smoke as well. We have a no-smoking rule on all of our cars, and these jerks just said screw it on that one. The car was a white Dodge Avenger 4-door. A 2010, I believe, but I'm not entirely sure. It was a standard class of car. It was horrible. My manager and the service agent just kind of stood in the wash bay and stared at it for 30 minutes after the customers left. Then I watched their faces go white with fear as my manager told them, well, clean it up the best you can. Straight up ridiculous. We had the car sent into an Indianapolis collision center because that crap was wrecked. This singular event was so bad that our area manager got involved. We filed a claim against the customer, had the car cleaned and detailed, and transferred it to be used at another branch a couple of counties away. Another story from the rent-a-car days, we had a Ford F-150 stolen. It was found a week later covered in Monster Energy decals and filled with stolen purses. We never caught the customers who stole it. Another time, some dingus took a log and smashed in the front window of a Genesis. Nothing was stolen, they just wanted to do damage. Again, nobody was caught. A fun bit that came out was that I got to drive the car to a repair shop with a gaping hole in the window. Fun times. I like that with the first car you literally just sent it to be someone else's problem. And actually I know what driving a car missing a windshield is like, and I feel doubly sorry for you. For those of you thinking it's just a playful wind tussling your hair, it's not. It's your eyes and mouth completely drying out from the draft and a ton of dust. And that's on a good day. God help you if it's raining. I once worked for a vehicle transportation company. Usually this would involve picking up cars and bikes damaged in accidents abroad. Anyhow, this time it was different. A company asked us to collect this car from a hotel car park in Berlin. They were very hush-hush about why, and it turned out that one of their members of staff had hired it on a business trip, but then they had promptly disappeared. When we got it back to the UK, it was still full of his stuff, which we thought was very weird, but when the hire car guy came to pick it up and was completely unfazed, it was almost like crap like this happened to him all the time. He drove it away, missing man's stuff and all. I had a short stint working for Avis. My job wasn't renting cars, but picking them up from out of state and driving them back. The two worst that I saw, one car was riddled with bullet holes and apparently was part of some kind of crime scene. There was blood in the back seat, but not tons of blood, so I'm assuming whoever got shot back there lived. Other than that, it was drivable and they had me drive it back. The worst one, and really the above was worse, but this one made me say, what the frick? I picked up a car from Indianapolis, the back seat folded down to make the trunk bigger. Somehow they'd broken the back seat so the thing wouldn't stay latched, and they'd also ripped up half the interior. But whatever, we get damaged cars all the time. Like, all the time. So whatever. I'm driving this car along the I-70 when I feel something brush my leg. I look down and I crap you not, there's a giant frickin' lizard in this car. Let me tell you, I damn near crashed from the shock. I'm like, what the frick? I pull off to the side of the road, call the company, and they told me they wanted me to drive it back anyway, and apparently they were warned, without relaying it to me, that there could be an animal in the car. Seriously, what the frick? Anyway, I'm not sure what kind of lizard it was. It was big, whatever it was. I'm thinking of like a large iguana or a baby monitor. I tried to grab it and throw it out of the car, but it kept tucking in behind the seats or running up into the trunk. After failing to get it out for over 15 minutes, I just tucked the opened, ripped-up interior under the seats so it couldn't get at my legs. Then I drove like crazy to get that car back to the station. Only about an hour ride from that point. I only worked there for like a month. I can only imagine what other people have seen there. I moved on to a better-paying job. That Avis job was meant for like retired people. They only paid minimum wage and it was a part-time job. In the 80s, I was a shuttler for National Car Rental, not an agent. I returned cars to their home city. I drove tons of cars with dirty diapers in the back seat, but the most what the frick was a Toyota van that had obviously been used to muck out a horse stall. It still had some horse doo-doo in it. Well, here's some of my best of stories. The first was an SUV that was returned with throw-up all over the back. We had to turn that baby around in an hour and rent it out to some guys on vacation. They were mad and had to wait hours for a replacement. They'd paid big money to get to a private airport just to sit and wait for the rental car guys. Then there was the rental car to a girl who had her car in the car shop. She kept it for about a month and her dog apparently lived in the car. The hair was so ingrained into that thing that it took hours to get halfway out. And finally, the former CEO of Hertz flew into my vacation town every month. We had 3 high-class SUVs sitting around only for him. The only other people that would rent them were substance dealers because they'd pay the crazy money. Those cars had to be spotless for the CEO, and the district manager met the CEO on Friday nights at the airport. When he flew out, the manager had to be there to see him off. The CEO got fired after he moved the headquarters down there. These answers are the reason you never buy a car that was at one time a rental. I used to work for Enterprise as a service agent. That's a fancy way of saying a car cleaner. I try to block out some of the crap that people leave behind for you to clean, and you can typically look at the customer and to know whether or not they're going to leave you a dirty car before they even leave the lot. One time, somebody left a portable toilet in the trunk. My friend got her car stolen. After only 23 hours, a cop found the thief and arrested him at a gas station a few miles from where he stole it. The male thief pulled up on the wrong side of the pump, and the car had a very feminine custom plate. The guy had the car for 23 hours and managed to trash the thing. We're talking Trojans, trash, ashes everywhere. We definitely all said what the frick. It's like he and his buddies ate McDonald's, smoked cigs, and did the deed with girls, or each other, I don't know, non-stop inside of one poor car. Former Enterprise employee here. We had a regular old gal who'd come in and rent out every couple of weeks for business. Really nice lady, and normally everything went very smoothly. Well, one day she returned the car and I had the pleasure to take her home after returning from the drop-off. I come to find a huge box on my desk, and all of the other employees staring at me as I approach it. My manager tells me to open it, but to not let out a big reaction. At this point, I'm trying to figure out if someone's playing a prank on me. Anyway, I opened the box and my eyes went about as wide as they could. What I saw was the biggest and most unique collection of bedroom toys I've ever seen. This nice lady had forgotten her box of goodies in her car. Well, somebody had to return the box, so I volunteered and headed back to her place. Unfortunately, she wasn't home at the time, so I left the box hidden behind a bush. We were pretty sure she got the box as she never returned to rent a vehicle again. That was an interesting day, to say the least. The famous clips that are horrifying once you know the backstory. My mum and I recently watched one of those 2020 shows where they were talking about a woman who went out drinking one night and was just never seen again. She had gone back to one guy's apartment, but hotel footage showed her leave shortly after arriving, and the guy in the apartment swore he didn't do anything. But they kept interviewing this one guy who was the last guy to see her alive. They'd stopped at a gas station, and he claims that she started talking to another guy, got in his car and left. He played the whole, "if only I'd known, I wouldn't have let her go" kind of act with tears and everything. Well, there's footage of him at his job a couple of days later, and the footage is really generic. He has a cooler on a rolling cart and he's putting it in a freezer. He works for a food production company. When the police interviewed his boss, they asked to see all of the footage and she obliged. When they got to that part of the footage, him putting the cooler in the freezer, she told the police to stop. She said that those coolers were used to store granola bars and there was zero reason for those bars to be put in the freezer. The body was in there. He took it back and burned basically everything in a barrel down the alley a couple of days later, but it was before the police had seen the footage, and he'd bleached his entire van before police could search it. The surveillance video of Timothy Pitson. It looks like just he and his mother are checking into a hotel, but in reality it's shortly before his mother ends herself and leaves behind a note saying that Timothy is safe with a new family now, but he'll never be found. He's still missing. The song Anne-Marie sings in All Dogs Go to Heaven about wanting a loving home. While recording, the voice actress, Judith Barcy, kept crying. Her home life was awful. Her father was mistreating both her and her mother, and they were afraid for their lives. Judith did not live to see the movie's release. What about the video that was on Tosh.0 where there were two girls and the dad tied them in a playful way to the bed? There was a really creepy tone and it was like a tutorial on how to be a creep so that people could do what they wanted. Tosh said on the show that it was creepy and the guy's whole YouTube channel was really weird. A few months later, the FBI or something investigated it, and it turned out the guy was, well, exactly what you'd expect. The dating game. The concept appeared innocent enough. A woman chooses a bachelor out of the 3 available contestants, and they go on a date. However, the game in 1978 turned dark when serial killer Rodney Alcala was nominated to be a contestant and actually won the game. The contestant refused to go out with him on the date because she thought he was actually creepy afterwards. She dodged a bullet. Probably quite literally, I suppose. I mean, I guess it's a pleasant surprise to me that people on that show could turn down their dates. I just have to wonder what sort of measures they might have put in place to actually legally compel people to do so after this incident, or if they just withheld any money that was normally on the line for the show or something. In any case, way to go with your gut, lady. Ian Huntley. That guy unalived 2 people and gave an interview to the news while they were missing. One day I saw a news report on a woman's body dropped in a lake. The police were still looking for the body. They interviewed a man who said, "Oh my god, that could have been someone's mother." A few hours later, they found out that the body was in fact that man's mother. I'm from the Czech Republic, and on YouTube there's a video of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire contender Victor Kalivoda. He's a pretty smart guy and performs better than well. However, later he becomes one of the most famous mass unalivers in the history of our country. That Who Wants to Be a Millionaire video always gives me goosebumps. Oof, that one Reddit thread. Redditors take a picture of them on a hike, and in the background there's the unconscious body of a person who was severely injured the night before. The 2004 tsunami videos. People having fun on a gorgeous day, enjoying the now very wide beach, not knowing the wave of death is coming towards them. When the 2011 tsunami hit, I was in high school. Taking mostly computer classes, I can't tell you how many videos I watched of CCTV, live streaming and stuff, videos of cars being washed away, buildings full of people being inundated with water, even one video where you see people rushing up a hill. There's this elderly couple who can't keep up and it honestly seems as if they just give up. I'm fairly certain they get washed away. That day was tragic. The video of former officer Craig Payer giving safety advice that was created in response to the murder of Karen Knott. In reality, Payer had killed Knott by luring her to an isolated area just off the freeway. Carmen Miranda's last performance. Carmen Miranda, the famous singer and dancer of the 1940s, performed on The Jimmy Durante Show on August 4, 1955. At the end of her performance, she briefly dropped to her knee, but propped back up afterwards. She later died of a massive heart attack that same night. The interview about a murder with Stephen McDaniel in which he, her neighbor, ended up being the one who kidnapped and dismembered her. It's horrifying looking back and seeing his tics where they bring her up, and even when they eventually find her body and he goes loco. That one video of the Russian influencer, in her birthday party at a swimming pool, she had the idea of pouring dry ice into the water for the visual effect. 3 people died intoxicated because of all the carbon dioxide. I believe one of those who lost their life was her husband. I don't know about innocent, but if you cut out the ending, the video leading up to Bud Dwyer's self-deletion just seems so normal. Just another guy on TV getting hounded by reporters over the latest controversy. If it had cut there, you could just air it on the evening news and nobody would know that someone had died less than 20 seconds later. It's just disturbing. I don't know if you're aware, but there are actually 2 videos from different vantage points. The first has a pretty horrible amount of blood. The second is, I'm sure, the one you're talking about, where it's like, I can't believe that much blood can even fit in a human body. There was a celebrity in the UK called Jimmy Savile who presented many BBC programs in the 1970s, especially ones with a younger audience. He did a campaign for seatbelt awareness and was a patron for so many charities for the vulnerable. He was probably the most loved celebrity for decades. After his death, it was revealed that he was, well, basically one of the worst people you've ever heard of. He did a number of things that we can't talk about on YouTube, but what we can say is that after seeing it, every piece of footage of him with a younger person takes on a new, sinister aspect. Actress Melissa Benoist was on Jimmy Fallon in 2016. She told a story about a time she fell and tore up half of her face and one of her eyes. She made jokes about it, and nobody really thought about it. Last year, she revealed that one of her exes was very violent when they were together. She revealed that the story she told on Jimmy Fallon was a cover-up story. The real story is that her husband, at the time, had thrown an iPhone in her face. It's creepy knowing that said ex was almost definitely Blake Jenner, who she starred in Glee with. I can't bear to rewatch any of the season his character is in. It creeps me out too much. That set must have been hell for her as well, what with Lea Michele also hating her. This video of a band performing in a bar in Thailand. Minutes later, the entire place caught fire and more than 60 people were dead. Also, the band's name is Burn, and the song they're singing is Linkin Park's In the End. That is some Final Destination crap right there. Dr. Nassar's sports medicine videos. He's one of the doctors for USA Gymnastics, and he's had a ton of videos on his website of him demonstrating various sports med techniques and treatments. It looks professional on the surface. The thing is, some of his techniques are totally made up. Some of the techniques he demonstrated on video, well, again, let's just say that we can't talk about them on YouTube, but they involve very inappropriate behavior with people of a younger age. He's demonstrating supposed healing techniques on hundreds of younger people under the guise of it being for their health, and sometimes directly in front of their parents. And looking back, you can tell he's really getting something out of it. Watch AmITheA on Netflix if you want the story of this scumbag, although I can't think why you would. Maybe not that innocent to begin with, but it's extra creepy knowing the truth. There's a video of an African grey parrot named Bud saying, "Don't frickin' shoot!" He witnessed his owner, Martin Durham, being murdered by his wife. If I recall correctly, Bud had also mimicked both sides of the verbal fights, alternating between a male and female voice. I believe the parrot testified in court and the wife was convicted. Okay, to clarify, I've looked it up, and Bud didn't formally get sworn in as a witness in court. Sorry to get your hopes up. He was, however, a useful witness during the investigation. The video of Alessandro Moreschi, who was a castrato singer. That video was him singing Ave Maria in 1902. I believe he was in his 40s. If you don't know what a castrato is, basically they used to be really popular to use in opera and other genres of music way back a few centuries ago, mostly to use in the place of female singers. A castrato is a male singer who's been castrated before puberty. Basically, if a young boy had a high enough voice in a choir or something along those lines, they would have a procedure while they were still young so they wouldn't lose their abilities to reach the high pitches because their voices wouldn't drop due to puberty. Honestly, the recording completely creeps me out because it was such an awful thing in the history of opera, and it's so creepy that only a little under 100 years ago did the last official castrato die. Thousands of people didn't survive the procedure, or they died due to complications not long after, and this recording is absolutely haunting as a result. Tommy Cooper's death on stage. People were thinking he was still acting when he collapsed on the ground dead from a heart attack. Tommy was a brilliant performer who was deliberately amateurish and had things go wrong as part of his routine. So when he died, many people thought it was part of the show. The narrator has always mused over the fact that this could happen in The Show That Goes Wrong or The Play That Goes Wrong. If you haven't seen The Play That Goes Wrong, Google it. I'll wait right here. It's a spectacular feat of choreography about a play where everything that could go wrong on stage happens. It's part of the show. It's done so well that I'm not sure that any of the audience would realize if one of them actually had a terrible accident on stage. Chris Watts pleading for the return of his family. He confessed to being the enactor of their demise the following week. Fetch, with Ruff Ruffman, is a fairly obscure PBS kids show that I liked to watch as a kid. The episode Ruff Pigs Out and Has a Whale of a Time features orca trainer Dawn Branshaw, who was unfortunately killed by an orca 5 months after the episode aired. Fire at a nursing home in Sydney back in 2011. TV reporter interviews one of the nurses, Roger Dean, who tells of helping to get residents out of the burning building. Then the police announce he was the one who set the fire to start with to try to cover up his theft of $85 worth of prescription meds. 11 people died in that fire.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius?
In 2016, YouTuber Brittany Louise Taylor uploaded a video titled, "I'm Engaged and Pregnant." She talks about a man she'd met on Tinder and that she was now bearing a child. After the baby was born, it emerged that this man was never in love with her but was just pretending. He'd had her targeted for human trafficking and had deliberately got her pregnant in order to sell her baby. With that information, it's really scary how he looks at her at the end of the video and how he treats her in other clips on her YouTube channel. Fortunately, she escaped the situation and got a restraining order. The scariest thing about this is that he didn't go to prison, and he went on to impregnate and marry another Instagrammer who has since disappeared from social media. Be careful who you swipe right with, kids. If you want to find out more about the story, Brittany has a book called A Sucky Love Story. It's badly written, but it is fascinating. And I should clarify, her son is also safe. They live with her mother in Arizona. If I recall correctly, WWE did a in memoriam with Chris Benoit very soon after he died. A little too soon, before it was announced that Benoit also ended his family before himself. The movie Blow Up is basically this concept, but a movie. It's about a guy who takes a picture of a woman at a park, and that woman demands that picture. She follows him around. She seduces him, makes him think she loves him. Then she takes the picture and leaves. But he kept a copy. He blows it up so big it takes up an entire wall. And then he finally sees what she was doing in those bushes. He goes to find the bushes afterwards and finds the dead body she was hiding when he took her picture. A popular 18-year-old CSGO YouTuber uploaded a reveal of the supercar he'd just bought. His Steam account, containing around 100,000 of in-game items, was then banned 6 months later. It was tied to the gambling websites. When everything was removed, he and many others were trade banned. Like they could still play, but they couldn't trade items. Those websites were a scam too. So anyway, this ended up causing him to have a serious mental breakdown. 2 months after his ban, he drove his car 100 miles per hour down a San Diego highway the wrong way in an attempt to end things. He crashed head-on into a van, not only fulfilling his wish, but taking out an innocent family in the process. The last Twitch stream of Wreckful. He jokingly comments about what if it's all a simulation and maybe you get out when you die. He asks if he should try his luck to his chat. You can tell he's glancing at his balcony a few times. He jumped sometime later. It gets even darker when you learn about his past. His older brother also tragically ended things for himself as well. The 2020 Britney Spears TikToks and all the videos she posted. I'm not a fan myself, to be honest, but as a person who doesn't know much about her, it felt weird and somewhat awkward to watch it. Then I read the comments to see that there are people saying like how she's asking for help all through these videos. Curb Your Enthusiasm were filming in Dodger Stadium during a live match. If they hadn't been there, a man called Juan Catalan would have gone to death row for murder. The cameras caught footage of him sitting in his seat and he was exonerated. There's a Netflix documentary on it called Long Shot. The video of the Boston Marathon bomber going to a supermarket to casually buy milk after blowing up 2 homemade bombs at the race. F that guy. Years ago I was running and a guy caught up with me. He told me he'd been following for a couple of miles and was hoping I'd keep him company for a bit. He then proceeded to tell me that his wife had done the Boston Marathon and they'd heard the explosions from a few blocks away and thought they were fireworks and cheered. He'd asked me to run with him for a while because he was dwelling on it that day and needed to talk to someone. His wife had been avoiding running and he wasn't used to running alone. Normally I get creeped out by people who talk to me while I'm running, but he was just a sad guy with PTSD. I felt bad telling him that the bombing had taken place the day after my wedding, and we were on a boat tour in Hawaii and learned about it when it started to rain and we were taking shelter, and my husband checked his phone and saw the news about the bombing. How about the episode of The Cosby Show when he makes his secret barbecue sauce and everyone gets really groggy and tired, and he tries getting it on with his wife? This video from June of 2012 showing a 20-year-old man playing Dance Dance Revolution at an AMC theater in Connecticut. He's being unknowingly recorded from behind by some people who spotted him, and they're both mocking him and admiring his skills at the game. 6 months after that video was taken, the young man in the video, Adam Lanza, would unalive his mother. He'd then drive his car to the nearby school where yet another of America's greatest firearm-related tragedies would occur. No motive for the event was ever found. Mother Love by Queen. Freddie got most of the song recorded, but Brian has the last verse. At the studio, Freddie said he was tired and he'd finish the rest some other time. He never did. He was resting at home during his final days. Brian came back later after Freddie's death and finished the last bit. I don't know if that's haunting so much as poignant, and frankly, compared to some of the absolutely horrific stuff we've been reading about here, it's almost a nice reprieve full of camaraderie and tribute for the fallen head of your band. And to top off this story of Queen, there's this final absolutely incredible factoid. I'm also going to add The Show Must Go On. It was recorded in one take, with Freddie being gravely ill at the time of recording. He simply downed some vodka and began to record the only take. That's one of my favorite songs from Queen, not because it's Freddie singing, but because of how he was singing it. Freddie didn't even have his full singing range in it, but his emotions were so much over it that it radiates his feelings. It's a truly touching song. The Mike Philpott Press Conference. In around 2012, there was a big story here in England about Mick and Mariad Philpott. Their house had burned down and they'd lost 6 of their immediate family members. This press conference happened shortly after and shows an emotional pair thanking people for their efforts trying to save the children. Turns out Philpott was a well-known slimeball who lived off benefits, had numerous kids with different women, and was in an open marriage that only he seemed happy about and had been on TV before bragging about his life. When one of his mistresses decided she'd had enough and left, she took her kids with her. Philpott didn't like that, so he concocted a plan to set fire to his own house, rescue his kids in a feat of heroism, and frame the woman who left him so she'd lose custody of the kids. The fire got out of control way quicker than he expected, and he ended up being responsible for a truly tragic loss of life. He did that press conference knowing he was responsible. He's now serving life in prison. There's a great picture out there somewhere taken during the same press conference. It shows one of the officers assigned to the case with a look of disgust, almost like he's thinking, "We know you did it, we just can't prove it yet." The 2007 movie Waitress. It's about a small-town waitress with a passion for baking who struggles with an awful bullying husband and an unwanted pregnancy while trying to find happiness and love. It's a sweet and really heartwarming film, and it has some big-name stars: Kerry Russell, Nathan Fillion, Andy Griffith, but most notably to this point, Adrienne Shelley. Adrienne Shelley was not only a co-star and the writer for Waitress, but this movie was also her cinematic debut as a director. When it was released in 2007, it was very well received for its heart and unique directorial style. However, Adrienne Shelley was killed in 2006, 3 months before it debuted. Her death was first ruled as a self-deletion by hanging, before further investigation showed that she was murdered by a stranger who staged the whole thing. Waitress was the only film she'd get to direct. The Adrienne Shelley Foundation now exists to support women filmmakers, continuing Shelley's legacy. Honestly, typing this up is making me a bit teary. Waitress is one of my all-time favorite movies, and a great musical as well, and losing someone like Adrienne Shelley just shows how cruel the world can be sometimes. Back in the 90s, there was a segment on the Jenny Jones show where a guy, Scott Amadure, confessed that he had a crush on a male friend, Jonathan Schmitz. Schmitz was so embarrassed by the appearance that he fatally shot Amadure 3 days after the taping. That kid who did anime reviews and ended up making a video about his big future plans. He ended up ending his entire family and tried doing the same to his old high school before he got caught. Also, Elliot Rodgers' old videos are just eerie as well. Tears in Heaven by Eric Clapton. It's a song written to his 4.5-year-old son who had died after falling 53 stories out of an apartment window that was accidentally left open. The videos of the leader of the Third Reich taken by Ava Braun. There's a part where he's flirting with her as she's filming him. It's cute if you know he isn't a frickin' H. The last video of the guy who made Temple OS. It's a tragic story already, but a few hours after that, he got run over by a train. A lot of people probably remember the Minecraft family, a wholesome YouTube video series in the early days of Minecraft, where a family, the son, who was the person who made the videos, his dad and sister would all play together. It was funny and a great part of my childhood. I went to rewatch the series, and some comments were referring to a Draw My Life video he had made, which revealed his father was actually pretty awful to his mother and himself during those times, and that playing Minecraft was the only time his family felt normal. That broke my heart, and I couldn't watch the series or see it the same way afterwards. The family movie The Adventures of Milo and Otis. It's a live-action movie about a dog and a cat. The filmmakers horribly mistreated the animals, even killed some in order to get their shot. To be honest, Homeward Bound was 10 times better, and now I know why. Seriously though, if I find out they mistreated animals on the set of Homeward Bound, my entire world is over. Okay, I just looked it up and Homeward Bound seems to be just fine, you guys. We can get through this. Peanut Butter Jelly Time. That guy was killed in a standoff with police and was Snoop Dogg's brother-in-law. Snoop Dogg even tried to de-escalate him during the incident. The video of that guy getting a strike at a bowling alley and showing it off. But he's the guy Stevie Stevens that unalived the old man on Facebook Live by doming him because his girlfriend Joy Lane broke up with him. It's pretty wild. Also, having seen that Facebook Live video around when it comes out, the second the camera flips around and it shows Stevens' face, it makes my stomach sink. It's so effed up.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all of the stories. And if you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.